Welcome to the Nash Tackle podcast, Gareth Fareham.
Thanks for having me.
Hello.
Hello. Very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, despite the 4-hour trek up the M27.
Yeah,
M3,
I do apologise.
M25.
I didn't realise you were that far away.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's just worst driving conditions ever.
Yeah. And the weather's not beautiful for it. And we're meant to be going fishing tonight as well.
Nice bit of fresh, warm water for the river, though.
Yeah.
Might not be such a bad thing.
Yeah, let's look at the positives.
Yeah.
Let's look at
There's going to be a flow.
It's not cold out there.
No, it isn't. It's nice.
No, obviously we're mid-October now. 20 degrees yesterday.
Was
we
it?
were out doing a bit of shooting yesterday, and look, I was in a t-shirt for most of it, considering how it has been.
To be fair, we should probably go barbel fishing instead. Probably absolutely prime for them, wouldn't it?
Probably, but I've never been and never caught one, so it wouldn't be as successful. Not that tonight is going to be successful, but...
Well,
It would be rude to travel 4 hours and not go fishing, Dan.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How's life been, mate? How's life? It's been a strange old year. I feel like every podcast we talk about it, but I guess you can't not talk about it.
It's been a really strange year. To be honest, I guess everyone's had a really different experience of it, though. I think that's probably the thing to sort of take from it, isn't it? I mean, on a really personal level, my own experience of it in lots of ways was actually really quite positive. It had been kind of, obviously, we were coming out the back end of winter. I hadn't done a huge amount of work. Obviously, carp fishing work, especially tuition work, isn't really a big thing during the winter. No one really wants to do them then. I'm not a massive fan of the long nights and stuff as well. When you're doing tuitions, you just got less time in the day really to do anything. So I tend to do them all really through the spring, summer, and in autumn. And so like bank balance was at like an all-time low. It had been a really busy year, like right up to the death in the autumn previous. And I did like my first one in March, and then that was it. Sort of it was cut. So so it was kind of. It was a strange one, really, because initially I was a bit sort of obviously terrified just by the fact that I'd have no income. Like, shit, what am I going to do? Like, I've got, obviously I'd gone from having a teacher's salary a couple of years ago, having a pretty secure job, to suddenly being freelance.
Taking the plunge, yeah.
Yeah, which was sort of quite a big thing, really. And I didn't really think about it too much at the time. And, you always take it for granted that work will be there, this will be there, that, you don't really put global pandemic.
Yeah, no one's ever seen that one coming, are they?
No, never. And so I went away, went to France, went to the Alps, and then went down to the Pyrenees in February for my birthday. It's my 40th birthday. And I just had this idea about waking up in the mountains behind a set of rods on my 40th. And so that was amazing. Really great trip. I had like 5 or 6 big trips planned in for the year as well. And I remember when we were away, like seeing stuff on the news, and I was thinking, like, this is closing in. I was like, I think in 3 or 4 weeks, that's it. It's going to be. And I spoke to a few mates about it, and they were like, no, it's not going to happen. And I was like, I think it's coming.
That was always a discussion with a lot of people. You had the optimist, the pessimist, the people who just didn't know what was going on, but it just seemed to gradually, place by place, just get, oh my God, this is getting serious and serious and serious. And then like...
Loads of my mates were still planning their spring campaigns and stuff. I was like, dude, you forget about it. It's over. It's not going to happen, mate. Yeah. It just isn't going to happen. And sadly, obviously it panned out as it did. And it kind of, to be honest, I am eternally grateful to Sticky and Thinking for supporting me still through that. Otherwise, I'd have been screwed. I'd have literally had no income whatsoever. So props to them, like still supported me through that. That was amazing. Couldn't really do any of the writing and stuff that had been because it was all kind of diary-based blog pieces for some of the European mags and stuff. Obviously, the tuition work's my bread and butter these days. So, it was all gone. So, after kind of about a week or two of sort of minor shock and thinking, shit, like, what am I going to do? Just kind of settled into it. And like I say, on a really personal level, I actually really enjoyed it. Like, to have the time just to have a reset and effectively like not do nothing because I was still really, really busy, but to have a completely different sort of structure and kind of way of life for 3 months was, in a way, was genuinely amazing. And also I kind of thought, when are you ever going to get the chance to do this again?
Of course, yeah.
So I just thought you got to make the most of it. And I think I did, really. In hindsight, looking back now, did the book, which was one really good thing. Yeah. We're really lucky. We've got quite a big garden Me and my wife Sarah love being in the garden, working in the garden, grow a load of our own fruit and veg and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Spring's an amazing time to be out working that. So to be honest, we just spent the vast majority of the time out there, rest of the time working on the book, and just trying to be positive and creative and just make the most of it.
I think that's what you've got to do at a time like that. Just there's a lot of people, like my girlfriend, for example, has just become this absolute fitness freak now.
Yep.
So she wasn't particularly into the gym, and you think you don't have access to the gyms and that, but she's just gone away, and now she is macros, everything all day counting, and she is just, in a mental sense, the happiest I've ever seen her. So whereas she's someone who worries quite about her health, and then the worst thing that someone who could worry about their health has happened, the global pandemic has come, not intentionally, has come out of it, is a really positive thing. So it's mad how it works. A bad thing, but good things can come out of it.
It's like anything in life, isn't it? No matter how bad it is, I think you've got to try and look to take something positive from it, and to just to make the best of it. And I think for me personally, because I do work really hard, like I'm terrible for just working all the time. So I think to have that opportunity just to like step back a little bit, just reset, just slow down as well.
Almost forced into you've got to have a break here.
Yeah.
You've got to have a break.
Yeah.
And like you say, you'll be busy. I think everyone was busy.
But not busy to the point where you're kind of like...
Yeah.
Every day you're kind of getting to the end of the day just, shot to bits and wired.
So and it's good that you've managed to take that sort of positive, because it did affect a lot of people in a bad way, but managed to keep it.
Yeah, like, obviously like the caveat for that is that just on a purely personal level, it was, for me, like I say, feel really lucky and privileged that it kind of worked out the way it did for me. I do know a lot of people that have been really badly affected. A couple of mates lost their dads.
Right.
And, other people that have lost jobs, people that are struggling with their houses and stuff. So it's kind of, it's just been a crazy year, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Also realised that, to be honest, I don't need as much money as I thought I did to do the kind of things that make me happy.
Yeah.
I think
It's always good when it's that way around and not the other way around.
Yeah, totally. Like just to enjoy simple things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when the sort of the ban was lifted, did you go out and get your fishing fix, or was it kind of?
Well, I had, so ironically enough, I'd planned my year immaculately this year.
Yeah.
Last year really was the first full year that I did the tuition work and was away filming, doing trips and stuff like that. And I kind of, when I was getting inquiries for tuitions, I was just like, I'll just squeeze that in. I'll do that. Yeah, I can fit that one in there. I'll do this. Didn't really leave myself enough time between anything. Didn't kind of leave myself like time to sort of set up before the trips, a few days after, just to sort my life out, sort my kit out, catch up on 7 days missed sleep and sort of all that. So I planned my year immaculately this year, and I was like, those are the dates that I'm going to do. They're my trips, bit of time between and stuff. And so, I was quite proud of myself, actually, that it was all nicely planned. And then obviously that just all went out the window. Yeah. I had, I don't know how many it was, 12 or 14 cancelled trips that I then, because I wanted to honour those, basically squeezed them in the summer.
Right.
So instead of everything being
nicely spread out and spaced out, you had a year's worth
just
of
all back
tuitions
to back.
Yeah.
In like 2.5 months. I did do a little bit, actually. I had 3-4 weeks on this little brick pit. Really interesting little lake, actually, up north. It's I won't say too much about it, but it's just basically a friend's, and I think there's only 9 carp in there, so tiny little stock, mental place, like 60-70 foot deep at one end.
Oh Jesus.
Crystal clear, use boats, do what you want. So that was really, really interesting fishing. Hooked 4, landed 3 out of the 9 in a few weeks fishing. So that was really nice, just really peaceful.
Get back into it, sort of thing.
Yeah. And then pretty much up until September was literally just tuitions every week, 2, sometimes 3 a week.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously you mentioned through lockdown you're working on the book. We'll get onto that in a little bit more time, but I guess that's taken up a bit of time since you finished your tuitions in September. But for us, it feels like September was like last week. September, October, it's just flown by.
Time this year has just been weird. Like I can't believe it is nearly November already.
Yeah.
It's just been such a crazy year.
I don't know how a year when not a lot can happen, it feels like still a lot sort of happened in a way, but you just can't remember any of it because it was just so.
It's almost like, I don't know, it's like when you were a kid and you've got no responsibilities and every day just kind of like just drifts into
It's
the
like
next.
the longest summer holiday I've ever had. Just going on and on.
Yeah,
and
but
on,
there was no. So I can't. Like, I didn't go on actual holiday. I didn't go abroad. All the trips got cancelled. It's just been assigned to the bedrooms for a lot of it. But no, it's been
odd.
Now we're here. Autumn.
Yeah, I know. Crazy.
Yeah. You got plans this year for a bit of personal fishing? Obviously, a lot of trips got cancelled because a lot of your fishing now is in Europe.
Worst year ever to be a European angler.
Yeah, the worst.
Unless you lived in Europe and then it was great.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually. I've never thought about that. No English coming around to fish my waters.
Or unless you're Samir, because he obviously lives out there now and he does his thing. So
he made the deadline, didn't he, by a day, I think. So he's literally on the turn of having a great time or having a not so good time. But
yeah, you had a few trips planned for the autumn?
Yes. So hopefully,
any of them still stand?
Yeah, I've got one trip that hopefully I'm still going to get in.
Oh, cool.
Don't know where, and to be honest, I don't really know exactly when it's going to happen yet. It'll probably depend on the book launch, to be honest. So it might be, if the book does launch end of November, it might be the first week of December, possibly. I was hoping to go away really sort of like early November, just a little bit earlier, just so it's not so cold, really. But so hopefully that will happen. I didn't think it was going to, because my passport would run out as well. I should have gone on a trip, as you know, actually, in September. But one reason or another, and again because of the book, that sort of didn't happen. But my passport was due to run out at the end of this month, and I'd had a look online, and they were talking about like 6, maybe 8 week waits for passports back. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But amazingly, it has turned back up.
Oh, really? Because
British passport, so no longer an EU passport.
Yeah. Alan had his had an issue. So Alan was meant to go to France with his family. He goes on his little fishing holidays. He had a lake booked. It had lodge, hot tub, lake right there, and he could just picture it. Kids playing in the pool and sitting in the hot tub, and he's just got his rods out. Didn't realise one of his little girls didn't have a passport, or it ran out. And because, like you say, these big 6-8 week waits, they were due to go in like 3 weeks. Tried to fast track it, didn't turn up. He went on his own anyway. Just left the family at home. He was like, "Well, I've got this lake booked. I'm going to go fish it." So he actually took a couple of the lads out. They filmed it, but that bit them in the arse. But
yeah, thankfully it has come back. So that is hopefully on the table. I don't know. Part of me really desperately wants to go. But then the kind of sensible part of me is actually because there's an awful lot going on with Sub at the moment as well. And obviously because there's only ever really me driving it. The sensible part of me thinks, actually, do you know what? That's probably a really, really bad time to go away. The day after the book launches. Yeah. Probably should stay in the UK and sort stuff out. The other part of me is just actually, do you know what? Fuck it. Yeah. It'd be really good to...
Missed out on a whole year of European fishing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, it's just one of them things. I had loads of incredible trips planned for this year and I've missed them, but do you know what I mean? It is what it is, and it worse things happen at sea. I feel really lucky that it's panned out as it is, to have missed a few trips, kind of just this drop in the ocean, isn't it, really? And there's always next year. Yeah. Then places will still be there, those carp will still be there, and
that's it. There is always next year.
Yeah, totally. And I think as well, it's actually... I think it's actually made me really appreciate that time a lot more. Like last year I did 6 or 7 trips, I think it was, and wasn't that they were amazing, because obviously they were, but they came round every 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah. And you'd be like, shit, I've got to sort my shit out again because I'm going away again. And it wasn't that you didn't appreciate it or that you didn't enjoy it, but it's like anything in life, isn't it? As soon as you start doing it really, really regularly,
takes that magic away from it
a little bit. Yeah. Incredible thing to do, obviously, but yeah. So I think it will have, by the time I finally do get back away, I think it'll have just,
you appreciate it.
Yeah, just changed the experience a little bit more and just made me appreciate it a bit more, definitely.
Yeah.
Brighter times ahead, of course. But your whole angling career has seen you witness some amazing times as well, which obviously throughout the podcast we're going to dive into a number of sort of notable occasions throughout your angling profile, Gaz. But like we do with everyone who appears on the podcast, we go right back to before you were fishing. So your early years, am I correct in thinking you're from up north originally? Even though you wouldn't think it from
Manchester. Yeah, my northern mates always take the piss out of the fact that I've got this weird hybrid accent. It's not really southern, it's not really northern. So I just get the odd word come out every now and again that's really northern and sounds really strange in the middle of a sentence.
You see, this is what I noticed then as well, because I wouldn't say northern,
not at all.
But it's passport. Well, I could say passport.
Yeah, that's only. But I've never lived up north, or I just have. My mum and dad were from Stoke area, so I've just got a little twang.
Yeah, so it's just words like that I just pick up on. So like, yeah, because you're definitely not northern, but you guys, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have had a clue that you were from up
Manchester.
North. Yeah.
I just don't say, all right, our kids.
yeah.
Not anymore.
Very often.
yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of your angling then, is this where you grew into the angler you are today? Is this where it all began for you?
Yeah, definitely. So really I've got my dad to thank for it all, to be honest. He was always a mad keen angler, coarse fishing, but he also used to do a lot of sea fishing as well. Really, really keen sea angler. There used to be a shop in, I can't remember where it was now. And there was just like a hub of them that were just these like super keen, hardcore sea anglers. They used to charter boats. They used to travel all the way down from Manchester, get the charter boats out, and but they would steam out for like 7, 8, 9 hours, fish for only sort of 2 hours, something like that. But they were catching like 70, 80 pound conger, massive ling, stuff like that. And then they just sleep all the way back. And he used to do that. We always fished on our like family holidays and stuff down in Cornwall, stuff like wrasse fishing off the rocks and stuff. And he started taking me coarse fishing. To be honest, as soon as I was old enough to hold a rod, really. And it just progressed from there. He had a mate called Dids, who was, he knew him through bike riding, because the bike riding's the other thing that sort of always run parallel to my fishing really all my life. And he had a mate that he knew through the bike riding who used to go carp fishing. And we're talking like probably 1987, probably 86, 87 back then. Like Carp World hadn't even started.
Yeah.
I think there was maybe only Carp Fisher, possibly, and that was it. So there was no carp media.
Yeah.
Which is a bizarre thought, really.
Yeah.
Now,
especially in this day and age, and especially what we do, I can't imagine a time where there wasn't something out there. Yeah,
just nothing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, it was all just magic and mystery, like, because you just didn't know anything about it. So yeah. Anyway, so we did a few trips with him, and then really as soon as we'd gone carp fishing, caught a couple, like that was it really. Tench and bream fishing, sat behind a swing tip in November trying to catch bream and stuff, just didn't really seem so exciting.
Lost the appeal.
Yeah, so we were really lucky really that we had some really good club fishing up north. Prince Albert Club had a great ticket. It had loads and loads of waters on it, loads of great kind of mixed fisheries, but loads of rivers and stuff as well, and sort of a handful of really good carp waters. So yeah, started fishing on them. Sand and Dovemere initially. Sandmere was amazing. It was really shallow, but it was absolutely full of like 5 to 10 pounders, like literally hundreds of them. It was a big lake. I'm not sure exactly how big it is. It's got to be somewhere between 30 and 50 acres maybe, unless that's my warped childhood sense of scale pushing it. But it was big. You definitely couldn't cast to the middle at least anyway. So so most of my early fishing really was done on there for a good few years, and then we just sort of progressed up from there really. Really pretty little estate lakes and stuff like Thornycroft, Whirlymere, Rossmere, all them kind of places up north. And just went from there. And then when I was sort of 16, 17, started to, obviously carp mags had come about then, been buying carp mags for quite a while, and kind of got the sense that there was a kind of a bigger, wider world of carp fishing out there. And that idea of fishing for bigger fish, I think, had just always really kind of stuck with me. I think for just something about it I just found really exciting.
Yeah, so I was going to say, obviously you've turned into, I'm not going to say a bounty hunter, but a big carp angler.
Yeah, I guess.
But was there a point where you kind of, like you say, you sort of, though that big carp scene kind of resonated with you and chasing bigger carp? Was there a point, or was there a particular thing which said, okay, I'm going to step up and fish with the big boys, sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. There was a water called Reedsmere. which was really near to my house. It was probably 15 minutes from where I lived. And can't really remember where I first ever heard about it. I think probably through some of Frank Warwick's early writing, just seeing it in the mags. And really back then it was that was the premier big fish water in the area. It was the water that people sort of talked about in slightly hushed tones. Every so often you'd be talking to somebody, you just hear little snippets of it. Oh, you know, the big common's been out at Reedsmere, whatever, £38 or something. And, you know, but you never really knew too much about it. So it kind of had this allure and this kind of sense of mystery about it, which was really exciting. But also you could drive past it. There was a road bank with some railings on it, an ice cream van, hundreds of ducks, and you used to get people feeding the ducks and stuff in the summer. Yeah. But you could drive past it and stop, and you could look out, which obviously lots of carp waters, you just, you know, if they're off the road or whatever, you kind of can't see them. So that place was always somewhere that you could go. You could stand, and as a kid, 15-year-old kid, I could go and stand on the railings and look out at this, and it seemed massive. It's like 40, 50 acres or whatever. And it's a pretty sort of dark, brooding looking place. I don't know why. There's like loads of boats on there. It's like top of yachts charging around and stuff.
I see, I really didn't picture it like this. I thought it'd just be this intimate lake out the way in the woods and that when you think of Reedsmere, but I didn't realise it was that.
No, not at all, no. So you got a big, it's kind of more like sort of like Raisbury in a way in terms of sort of feel. You know, you got big yacht club on there, loads of big boys and stuff out there, covered in seagull shit and stuff. And, you know, like, yeah, all the boats charging around. And yeah, that road bank. And it was really funny, actually. I went back, I did a slideshow in Crewe, I think it was, a couple of years ago. And I was with Marcus. And I was like, oh, I'll take you to Reedsmere just to have a look. He was like, oh, yeah, it'd be amazing to go and have a look at the place. And we went back, stopped on the road bank and got an ice cream. Same van. It's a local company called Granelli's. And walked around the front, I was like, oh, my God. It was the same woman that used to serve me 20 years ago. I actually said to her, I was like, this is going to sound really weird and you won't recognise me. But I was like, I used to fish here in like the late 90s and used to buy ice cream off you back then. And yeah, it was like she hadn't aged a day.
Really?
Yeah, it was mad. And
something in those ice creams then. She hasn't aged a day.
I just thought it was amazing. She said something along the lines of it being such an incredible place to watch the seasons change.
Yeah. And
I was just like, that's mental. You've seen 20 years worth of changing seasons of that.
From almost the same spot.
From the same spot.
And, like,
you know, with this big beam and smile on her face, I was like, that's so lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lovely. So it was Reedsmere. And I sort of, back then I only fished with my dad. All my mates rode bikes. They used to think fishing was weird. Like, they were like, how can you do that? Yeah. Like, I go like, because fishing was always fitted in between the bike racing season. So every weekend we'd go away in the vans, race for the weekend. So kind of, we only really fished when there was no racing on, basically, because the race season is you're like stacking points up towards the season and, you know, all that sort of thing. So the fishing always just fitted in at like as and when around it. So all my mates they just thought it was weird that I went for it. They were like, how can you race bikes and then just go and sit behind some rods? Doesn't make sense.
Such a juxtaposition in terms of sports, like
such a polar opposite. But I think probably the polar opposite nature of it actually was probably quite important for me, I think, back then, because it just offered a completely different experience. So I can't remember where I was going with that, but
you said you only ever catfish with your dad at that point.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, so I only ever fished with my dad, and so I didn't have like any access to any kind of circle of information whatsoever. It was just literally my dad, and it's really weird. Like, he's a really social guy. Like, loves going down the pub, loves a beer, big group of mates, but he really didn't like socialising when we were fishing. Like, if anyone came up to talk, he'd just like give them the cold shoulder. I don't know if it was because he was with me and I was a bit younger or what, I don't know, but he just didn't like talking to anyone when we were fishing. Really strange. So, anyway, sort of in a roundabout way, I'd ended up sort of getting to know a couple of people that fished Reedsmere. There's one guy called Steve Cook, who I didn't really realise it at the time, but an incredible angler and kind of had like a really big sort of place in the northwest scene. And I bumped into him a couple of times on some of the little club waters, and then I used to work in McDonald's back then, and I started seeing him on the drive-through window, and like I'd be like just trying to hang out the conversation as long as I could. I'd be like, oh, hey, how's Reedsmere? What's been going on? And kind of just
building
sort of trying to
queue up.
Yeah, like until the queue had got too big, and then sort of like have to go on kind of thing. But I used to see him there really regularly because I worked there for a bit. And really it was Steve that kind of not like physically encouraged me to take the plunge to go and fish there, but just kind of, I felt like I had some slight connection to the place.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling so totally removed from it that I just couldn't get a ticket and start. So, because my dad had no interest in fishing at all. He had no interest in fishing for big fish. He always used to say if they fell off at the net, that was brilliant because he didn't want to get his net wet or the mat wet.
Cool. I wish I could feel like that sometimes. That would be a lovely way. You'd never feel
really
disappointed.
Really funny. But he had such a different experience of fishing. Like, even though he loved the bones of fishing, he just had no interest in taking them out, weighing them, photographing them. Like, I've got one photo of my dad with a fish.
Really?
I pretty much had to force him to take that photo as well. Because I was just like, look, I haven't got one photo of you with the fish. It was like a 2.5 pound perch. I was like, just hold the fucking perch. I want a photo of you with a fish.
Face like thunder, like.
Yeah, no, it's quite just like holding it really awkwardly because he'd pretty much never held a fish for a picture as well.
Yeah.
So I got a ticket and started. And that really, to be honest, that kind of marked the sort of departure of me fishing with my old man, really, because he just, like I say, he had no interest. Didn't really have any interest in sitting it out fishing for big fish. And he also didn't really have any interest in the sort of social scene that went with that sort of big carp fishing as well. And Reedsmere is a funny lake in so much as some of the swims are incredibly close together. There's one bit called the stream. Like, this would constitute 2 swims. Right. Like, you pretty much, you could use the same bivvy pegs. Like, it was that close. You fished vastly different water because it was on a point. This tiny little point. You'd have 4 brollies on there, literally
all back to back.
Yeah, just like Tetrised in, literally Tetrised in. I remember doing a session one winter, and I actually had to have my brolly facing this other guy, Mark the Bull, he was called. I literally had my brolly facing his, so like the open door. So we were just sat, because the wind was so bad, I'd kind of had to put mine behind this tree for a bit of shelter, and sort of he was there. So we just spent like
forced to socialise and
days,
forced to
just staring at each other,
start to get to know each other. So I guess that's one way to be an icebreaker if you were a bit nervous going over there and starting.
Which I was completely terrified. In all honesty, because it always had a bit of a reputation as well. Like, there'd been tackle thefts over the years.
Right.
It had a rep for being really, really busy, like incredibly busy. People waiting for like 2 days, 4 days to get into areas and stuff like that. The fishing was hard as well. It always had a reputation as being some of the hardest fishing in the Northwest and stuff. But all that, in a way, for me, kind of made it all the more exciting as well. I think, if it had just kind of been any other lake, it wouldn't have had that same allure. So I got my ticket and started. So I'd have been 17, I think, 1997 when I started. Completely inadequate as an angler. I still had my big 2-man aquadome that I fished with my dad in. Still had a Coleman double burner. I remember getting dropped because I didn't have a car.
Yeah.
So I think my mum had dropped me with my kit for that first trip, and I fished in these swims called the Pines. I remember reading in Paul Selman's book. Basically, he said that they never produced carp really ever. So I was like, it's the perfect place just to tuck myself away for the first few nights. Like 3 trips later, got this mound of kit there, sat and blanked for 2 nights, and sort of then went home. And I was seeing lads with sort of their kit, just like little rucksack. Bear in mind, this was 97 as well. So cart porters didn't exist back then. I think a few people in the south were maybe using like gardener's wheelbarrows, but no one was using barrows because no one had made them. So it was literally like little rucksack, sling with a brolly in, 2 rods, bed chair, and then either a bucket or water butt or whatever in the other, whichever one you hadn't dropped in the swim, basically. And that was it. And sort of, I remember the first couple of trips seeing all that happening around me, seeing people moving and thinking, like, I'm definitely missing a massive trick here. So sort of like a couple of trips in, tipped all my kit out on the lawn at home, just worked out what I really did and didn't need, tried to get it all back on my back. I was like, shit, that's way too heavy still. I can't carry that in one trip. Refined it down again and sort of, and then just sort of went from there, really. And I think I did 3 seasons on there in the end before I went down to uni, moved to Cornwall.
and a massive learning curve for you on there. Yeah. Did you think was there some success at the end of the learning curve?
Yeah, I actually caught the big mirror on my 4th trip.
Oh, really? So at the beginning of the learning curve?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those classic, you see it all the time, don't you? And I've seen it happen so many times over the years on other lakes. Someone that doesn't know the lake, perhaps isn't that experienced, doesn't know the kind of the way. I always think every lake has got their way. Right. Elstow's got its way, hasn't it? Like the car park had its way, and you kind of become assimilated into that. I think whether you want to or not, it just kind of creeps in, and before you know it, you're doing the same thing as everybody else. Someone new comes on, does something completely different, fishes a Brazil in the edge in that swim no one's fished for 2 years and catches the big ones.
Was it out of that swim you said? Was it the pine?
It was close to the pine. Basically, like, Reeds is funny because it's separated into really quite distinct areas, and you have to park in really distinct areas. You can't really, or you can, but it's a hell of a long walk to sort of get round to any of them. They're sort of separated off by big copses of woodland, farmers' fields and stuff. So you can't actually do a full circuit of the whole lake. And the woods bank always seemed a little bit like friendlier somehow. Like the meadow is mental. I think it's six or 7 swims in probably, I don't know, 870 yards of grassy meadow.
Right.
A few trees in between, classic big old Cheshire oak trees and stuff. But you're literally just lined up like 10 yards away from each other. So there's no way I was getting involved with any of that. Yeah. Whereas the woods was kind of nice and quiet. The swims were a little bit more tucked away and what have you. So,
hide a little bit in there.
Yeah. Thankfully, I did have enough nous about me back then to realise that like any big wind was a good thing. So I'd seen this forecast. It was like teletext back then. Yeah. There's no such thing as like Weather Pro or whatever. It was literally checking teletext, like checking the old pressure charts and stuff like that to see what was happening. And I knew there was this big westerly coming in, got set up sort of the day before it was due to hit that night, basically. And just got some bait out there, got some rigs out, and first bite was the big mirror.
Nice.
Yeah.
Way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, what was quite funny though as well, there is a funny story behind that. So I'd heard these stories that when any of the big fish got caught from there, the lake would get really, really busy. And it seemed really busy to me as it was anyway. So I caught this big and sacked it up. And there was quite a few other lads fishing in that area that night. Like over the course of that day, quite a few other guys had turned up and gone kind of around me. So I knew I was in a good area as well, because quite a few people for the first time had actually put their head into the swim and gone, all right, mate, when you going? Yeah. And I'd be like, I've only just set up. I've got my 48. And so I knew I was in a good area. And I could have just gone next door and just asked the lad for photos. But I was like, for some reason, I didn't want to tell anyone. So I phoned my dad, and my dad came down at first light to shoot him. He only took like 5 photos as well, like 5 pretty shit, because he was just with 35 mil back then as well. And he was like, they'll be fine. And I was like really wanted him to just like rattle a whole film off. But thankfully, a couple of them were all right. And I wasn't going to tell anyone. A little bit later that morning, a lad called Martin Allison has wandered into the swim, and I think I must have left the sack hanging in the tree. Classic error, don't do that. Yeah. And he's clocked it and he's gone, all right. He's like, what did you have then? And I didn't expect him to be so forward with it. And I got, it was just a little common. I don't know why it came out. It just,
lie just
popped out. It just fell out of my mouth. And I didn't really think too much else of it. And then later that summer, I got to know a few lads and this, that, and the other, and got involved in this conversation one day about why single hadn't been out. And I just sort of piped up, like, I was like, it has actually back in July. I was like, I caught it, and they sort of grilled me, and obviously I sort of told them what had happened, but they obviously just didn't buy it.
Right.
And then 3 or 4 weeks later, like one of the lads had said to me, they were like, mate, everyone thinks you're a liar, you know. I was like, what do you mean? I just didn't really realise it was all like well above my head. And they were like, well, you told Martin you had a little common, and you've just turned around and told everyone you had the big one. Like, and I brought some pictures down basically and showed them. And, and that was it. I was just welcomed into the fold.
He gets it. He gets it.
Yeah. I think in a funny way, like completely unmeditated way. I think they actually respected the fact that I hadn't really shouted about it. Really, it was just complete naivety and confusion.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How was the atmosphere on there with the members? Did you say did you learn yourself through trial and error, or was it the fact that you learnt off of other people whilst you were on there? Was it a nice place to be?
Do you know what? Like, it actually was. It had this reputation of being like really cliquey, really moody. But in all honesty, like it just absolutely wasn't at all. I think I've always found over the years, you find that with a lot of lakes, like that moodiness and that cliquey reputation is just perpetuated sometimes to keep places a little bit quieter. But actually it was really lovely, and like as soon as people realized that you were sound and you were a friendly guy and you talked to people, you know, you were just welcomed in and what have you. And obviously it took a little bit, you know, no one, it's the same on any big carp lake, I find, you know, no one is broadcasting the information, or no one's broadcasting the best information. It might be the odd little snippet thrown out that kind of, you know, everyone knows, but it takes a while, doesn't it? I think to just like earn a little bit of trust and respect from people, I think. And but also because you were fishing so physically close to people, you literally couldn't miss what people were doing. So I just tried to watch as much as I could what people were doing, and you know, you'd see what sort of rigs they were doing. You know, I could see that everyone had these little bright 12mm hook baits on and stuff. I was like, what are these? Yeah, like, you can't buy those in the shops.
Because, you know, was that must have been when sort of the bright hook baits, the fluoros, that's where it all really started with Frank Warwick on there?
Yeah, I mean, the lads in the Northwest have been using them for a really, really long time. Like, I can't really remember when Frank started using them, but it might have even been like late 80s, something like that. And so because it was on that lake, because it was on Reedsmere really where he sort of really started using them, that lake in particular, I think, had just always had a really kind of embedded history of them being used. And I remember like people would only really have like 2 pots of hook baits in their rucksacks. That would be it. They'd have a pot of food bait, pop-ups, and a little pot of bright ones. And that was it, really. That was all people. And they were always small as well. And it was only ever really one of like 3 combos as well. It was either squid, fizz and harvest, or the mulberry. And it was like those 3 combinations were like, they were the ones. They were the ones. And ironically, still just as successful to this day, which is quite interesting. I remember back then there was loads of talk, people saying, you know, carp won't carry on falling for this for too much longer. You know, this sort of, 20 odd years down the line, and they're still just as successful. Obviously, an infinite amount more people use them now than they ever did as well. And still, and I don't think they'll never stop working.
No, I don't. And then, so from there, you say you went down and moved down south for uni.
I did, yeah. So I did a bit of a year, not really full time, but doing quite a bit of fishing. So I had 1 year on Reedsmere where I'd finished my A levels and took a year out before I went to do an art foundation year at Mac College, and worked at McDonald's as sort of little as I could to fund as much fishing as I possibly could do on Reeds. So that was a great year. Like, I've got really, really fond memories of that year. Like, I'd got to know loads of the lads. The kind of the scene and everything surrounding that lake at the time was amazing as well. It was just really exciting. You know, the fish really were at their prime for the area. Really big fish, even on a national level, really. Like, the big commons were big fish nationally back then, like upper 30s. There wasn't really many 40-pound commons in the country. There was only really like the Snake Pit common and like the Warmwell common, I think, in the late 90s, and then the 2 big Reedsmere ones, really. There wasn't really much else other than that. So, there was a real buzz around the lake, and I really, really enjoyed that year. Like, learned a hell of a lot, really. Sort of the kind of, you know, transition really in my fishing was massive from where I'd started being basically clueless to a couple of years down the line being like fully fledged with 2 Nevilles, 2 rod, you know,
a carp angler's born sort of thing, like,
totally.
properly.
It's definitely coming of age, like, and just being surrounded by such good quality of anglers as well. That was the thing. Like, there was so many good anglers on there back then. Like, pretty much everybody fishing. I reckon like 80-90% of the guys that were fishing there were on it. Like, we're really, really on it. Yeah. You know, really mobile, you know, really vigilant, prepared to move in the middle of the night, doing weekends and a couple of work nights and stuff. And so it was all pretty intense. And it was kind of sink or swim situation, really. Like if you didn't step up to the plate and start fishing like that,
I suppose there's no
catch it.
substitute for actually seeing it. I mean, this day and age is a bit different with the wealth of information that we've got available to us, but even then, actually seeing it on the lake, being there and experience it is the way to sort of accelerate, I suppose, so that transition.
Yeah, massively. I think, like you say, it's all well and good, isn't it, to see something written or to watch a video and kind of get a bit of it, but it's always a filtered view. Like you're never really seeing the reality of what people are actually doing. Like I remember seeing lads swimming out buckets of hemp at 2 a.m. naked and thinking, like, shit, and is this what it, like, oh god, this is what it takes. And there was kind of like, there was a spell where everyone was swimming their hook baits out on there. There's like really substantial area on reeds that's fairly shallow, like 3 to 5 foot, really, really weedy in the summer. And there was this spell basically where everyone was kind of like partly wading, because you could wade for a little bit, but the silt was so deep, it was pretty dangerous. Stroke swimming hook baits out, and just seeing stuff like that happening in front of him as well. And then trying it and realizing how ridiculously difficult it was. You know, being like 80, 90 yards out, suddenly with no frame of reference, you're like, shit, am I even still in my water? Or am I in the next swim's water? Or fuck, like, you know, and then not really having anything to find spots with other than your feet, weed everywhere, like dropping rigs and just getting back to the bank and thinking, well, that's completely fucked.
That's crazy. Thinking
like, what was the point in that? Like, I should have just cast them out. And, you know, so, but things like that you can only really learn through experience and actually experiencing the logistical difficulties of actually doing it.
This is what I was going to say. It's on perhaps a bit more of a tame level. You can have a video of someone saying, right, I've walked around 4 times or whatever, and people go, right, that's what it takes, walk around 4 times. But until you actually see someone carrying their stuff, sweating their ass off, and they have just done 4 laps, or then you go and do it yourself. Like you say, once you're put into that situation, then you realise that, okay, this is what it takes. So that must have rubbed off.
And kind of, you know, I see a lot of that on the tuitions that I do as well with lads, you know, spending all morning walking around looking for fish and not setting up, because I'm like, well, we haven't seen anything worth setting up on yet. And, you know, lads saying, oh God, I'd have set up hours ago. I'd have just chucked them out over there because the wind looked good or something. But then finally finding a few, whatever, off the back of the wind or something, getting some hook baits out and catching one pretty quick. And then realising there's almost like these little kind of sort of like eureka moments where they're like, I would, you know, it's that point where you realise that you would never have done that before until you've seen somebody else do it.
Yeah, and I guess on Reedsmere it was rife.
Yeah, like, and there was just all sorts of things, like everything from how people were casting, because it was the range fishing as well. Like the lads were doing 120s, 130s sort of back then. It's like 8-pound Daiwa sensor and mono leaders and stuff like in the autumns. So, you know, like everything really from, the casting to the rigs, the way people were baiting up, stuff like the swimming out and stuff like that. And so there's loads of things that you just weren't really sort of seeing or hearing about anywhere else, really. So to see it first, it was a massive eye-opener. And
prepared to leave then, weren't you? I guess you left and you went to down south and whatnot, and you almost could stand on your own 2 feet then. I think so. And I mean, I think even to this day, you know, 20 odd years on, I still often sort of think back to those days. You know, and I still sort of think, oh, you know, what would such and such do, or even like I remember seeing, I think was it? I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Mark Bryant did something in SIP not that long ago with crushing up snails. I remember seeing lads because he used to get massive swathes of great big snails in the summer on there. I remember seeing lads collecting big buckets of snails, smashing them up with crushed tigers and stuff, and walking them out and putting that out back in '98 and stuff like that. So you know, all these sort of things, like, and the little tiny bright hook baits and all that as well. It's, you know, all them things just kind of come back round. So I think a lot of those things, even though they're 20 odd years old tactics, I think a lot of them are still pretty valid to this day, really. So it kind of gave me a good toolbox, really, to move forward with. So I went to uni.
went to do a fine art degree down in Cornwall. And to be honest, I didn't really I almost saw that as like the end to my carp fishing.
Right.
Even though I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I'd always had this dream of moving to Cornwall. I'd always wanted to go to Cornwall, always wanted to surf. I did surf, but only on holidays and stuff like that. But I always wanted to live within kind of like reach of the coast so I could surf regularly. So yeah, went to art college in Cornwall, and I still wasn't driving actually at that point. So kind of was pretty limited really for any options to fish or anything, even if I'd wanted to. I was living in halls, and that was just a whirlwind of cheap cider and, you know,
fishing is usually the last thing on your mind when you're first
no one's carp fishing in their first year at uni.
Nah.
Surely. I don't know. If there is out there, let us
Fair
know.
play. Yeah. Stop,
play.
get out more.
But yeah, it was just a complete whirlwind really. And then I think it was partway through my second year, passed my test, came back with a car, and I actually brought, I don't really know why I did. I think I must have just been missing carp fishing. I think as much as I was loving the sort of, you know, the coastal life, I must have been missing carp fishing, because I brought my copy of In Pursuit back to uni with me, read a couple of chapters of In Pursuit, and that was it basically. The next time I went home, brought my kit back with me. My housemate, I was still living in a shared house. Housemates were like, "What the fuck is all this?"
Yeah.
You know, I was like, "Yeah, it's my fishing kit." And they were like, "Nice one. Where's this going to go?" I was like, "It's just going to have to live in the utility room for, you know." So yes, that was all sort of, that was quite funny. And then you're pretty limited for options really in Cornwall, but thankfully really, really close to Falmouth. There's a couple of really good reservoirs. College Reservoir, which people used to fish back in the day when it didn't have a closed season. So back in the 90s, lads used to travel, I think, from all over the country, because there's no closed season in Cornwall.
Right.
So when there was a traditional close, people used to go and fish down at College. Really beautiful old fish. I don't know whether they're leanies, but they're like real old strain, scaly ones and stuff. Really beautiful lake. And they, about 2 or 3 years previous to me getting there, they'd actually moved all the stock from College Reservoir up into the top reservoir. And that one had been open for fishing. So yes, I spent a couple of years fishing on there. Sort of at times kind of like full on. I did a few little baiting campaigns and got stuff going and what have you a couple of times. Caught some really nice ones. But it was just kind of odd trips really, sort of here and there in between everything else.
I was going to say, when you first get your car, that usually opens a world of opportunities, but happening midway through uni, I suppose you wouldn't have taken as much as advantage of that as if you were back up north.
No, not at all. You know, I mean, I didn't really I wasn't really thinking about it too much then. You know what I mean? I'd just go fishing if I wanted to go fishing. If the surf was good, I'd go surfing. It was quite handily, actually. And I was talking to my mate about this the other day as well. Like good fishing conditions and good surfing conditions are like polar opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in Cornwall, like big westerlies or big southwesterlies are terrible for the surf because it just blows everything out because Cornwall's so exposed. Obviously, great fishing conditions. You know, light, gentle easterlies, high pressure, northerlies, great for surfing.
I never would have thought that. I would have thought it would have been the same. Just thinking about it.
No, actually, well, because you're always looking for like big groundswell that's way out in the Atlantic, and then really light localized winds to keep the waves sort of nice and clean. So I could kind of balance that sort of quite nicely, really.
Yeah.
But you know what? You know, sort of being at uni, it's always there's just so much
on your plate. Yeah. So was it must have been once you finished uni, you dove straight back into it.
Yes and no. I stayed in Cornwall for a couple of years after. I was down there for about 5 years actually in the end. And I didn't really, like, when you leave art college, there was no careers advice back then. There was no, and like we were just chatting about before, there was barely even an internet.
Yeah.
So kind of access to sort of information for anything regarding any kind of career in the creative arts was sort of like slim to none, really.
D you have any idea of what you wanted to do at that point? Or like going into uni, going into the fine art degree?
No, it was just I'd just always loved being creative in whatever way that was, I think. Always drawn, always painted, always made stuff. So it just seemed like the logical thing to do, really. Like in hindsight, I probably wish I'd done like graphics or illustration, or perhaps something that was vaguely more career-minded than fine art. You know, it was, I mean, it's like laughable looking back now, really, but the kind of, you basically just had a studio space for 3 years, one lecturer a fortnight, or it might have even been a month or something.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, you just made what you wanted. Really, you rolled in when you wanted, you left when you wanted, which was amazing because it freed you up creatively to do absolutely anything. But it just set you up really to do nothing.
Yeah. At the end of it, it was a great 3-4 years. But at the end of it, it's oh, what do I do now?
Well, you live in this little bubble. Like, you're surrounded by other artists and other creatives who are probably just as absent-minded as you and are just involved, like just interested in surfing and making cool shit. And then it was just like, you know, you graduated and like the bubble burst and everyone was a bit like,
uh-oh, yeah, shit.
What now? It was like no one had thought about it until the very end. It was quite funny. Whereas like now it's, I mean, you know, my experience of being a teacher and giving careers advice to sort of all my A-level students was literally like careers advice, like death by careers advice, you know, like UCAS every week for the whole of year 13. You know, what do you want to do? What are you going to do? Have you researched it? Have you, you know, well, back then it was just like everyone just drifted around and kind of did what they want. But yeah, anyway, so kind of you're pretty limited really for work in Cornwall. In some ways, like some people left, went to London to sort of chase the dream, but Cornwall's just such a beautiful place. It's such an intoxicating place that most people didn't really want to leave, so they just ended up working, doing whatever. You know?
I was born in Cornwall.
Oh, were you?
Yeah. I lived there for like
whereabouts?
Near Bodmin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But it's the reason I left. My mum, we were there. I was there till I was about 7. But my mum and dad left because they thought if these boys stay here, they'll just end up working in the local pasty shop and not really getting out and seeing the big wide world. Despite them absolutely loving it as a place and a great place to grow up, they just knew that we'd probably be better off a bit closer to big cities. And
it is a difficult place. And I had a few students actually that wanted to go to Falmouth to do their art degrees, and I was like, look, it is the most beautiful place, but
yeah,
you know, and I think that was always the caveat with it. So anyway, I just wanted to stay there. So I ended up working, just labouring actually for a mate's dad who used to work on like these big period property houses. And I did all sorts, like everything from landscaping to decorating to like cobbling, just like all sorts really, which was amazing. And I did do quite a bit of fishing actually that year because the lake was pretty close to some of the places that we were working on. So I'd have my kit in the van and stuff, like doing classic work nights and stuff. And I really enjoyed that. It was about 1.5 years I did that for actually, and loved it, and almost got myself a trade. Like, you know, the plumbers were coming in, the electricians were coming in, and like a few times I'd sort of spoke to them, and the possibility of an apprenticeship was, you know, something that I really liked the idea of. Like, and then, it was kind of like a few things happened, this, that, and the other. And I basically ended up moving back to Manchester in the end. Kind of had to make a decision about really what I wanted to do. I was like, do I want to do something with my degree, chase that, sort of being creative in some way, or just stay in Cornwall and do that? And it was a tough decision, but so I moved back to Manchester for a brief spell, which is when, ironically enough, I actually started fishing back down south.
Yeah.
So that was when I fished sort of Coatwater and Pingewood.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were going to just get onto that as well. I was reading a few articles and things before you came in and that, and it's always that image, because I didn't know, because Curly in the office, photographer for those who are listening, he's from that area, sort of that neck of the woods.
They're local boys, huh?
Yeah.
They'll lynch me when I get out for
naming it. Why are you saying coat for?
But it was actually one of the images that I saw in one of the articles with the diving board. Yes. And I recognised the diving board, but I never knew the name of the lake. Yeah. So it's only looking into that a little bit more that I realised, that's where that is, because it was quite a famous place to fish.
Yeah, I mean, really recognisable landmark, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really recognisable landmark. It was. So I'd done the drawings for Mike Wilmot's book basically, and got to know Mike, and the Park Lake was quite a bit of his book. There was like 2 or 3 chapters, and the cover shot as well. I don't know if you can remember the cover shot, like big old mirror, big massive old overslung mouth. Amazing shot of this sort of bit like upper 40 mirror. And I don't know, there was just something about the place that I found really captivating. A bit like going back to the Reedsmere thing originally. It didn't feel like a particularly inviting place to go and fish. Yeah. But there was just something about it that I found really exciting. And
which is strange because it's not for those who don't know Cote Water, it's not your quintessential English carp fishing lake, is it?
But, well, one end of it sort of is ish. The other end of it is just a concrete bowl, basically. And yeah, so I'd done the drawings for Mike's book, talked to him quite a bit about it, and it was hard to get tickets basically back then, or it was hard to get a night ticket anyway. You could get a day ticket, you could bowl up any day of the week and fish it on a day ticket, but you couldn't get the night tickets. I remember talking to Mike, and he was just like, mate, he was like, just do the days. He's like, it's a good day water, sort of wink wink kind of thing. He was like, just have a go for it. And so it was that little kind of push really. But was
that on a day syndicate, or did you literally have to get a day ticket every time you went?
You could get like a day season ticket.
Yeah.
Or you could, I swear blind, you could just, like, the ranger would just come round, and I might have invented that memory. I'm not sure.
Either way, you could fish.
I can't remember. Yeah. But I did the first year. I did actually get the day season ticket. But you had to get a Swindon card. So my first trip down, I went to a leisure centre nearby, got a Swindon card, because you didn't need to be a Swindon resident to get the Swindon card, but you had to have the Swindon card to get a ticket at the park.
What is a Swindon card?
I was about to gives you access to like Swindon stuff,
right?
Whatever that is.
Like in the Swindon club.
Yeah, no, it's just like a Tesco club card for Swindon.
I've never heard of a city having its own card.
You get like reward points for leisure centres and stuff like that, I think. And I don't. If I'm totally honest, never looked into it.
Yeah,
just went and got my Swindon card.
One Swindon card, please.
First rule of Swindon Club: don't talk about.
That's
Swindon
it.
Club.
Yeah. I know, what have I missed out on?
Yeah.
So my first year was on the days, and actually the first trip down, quite why I decided to start in the winter, I'm not entirely sure. To be fair, I've always had a bit of a habit for just doing like spur of the moment random things. I don't often like premeditate and calculate stuff. I'll just be like, that looks great, I'm gonna go and do that.
I like the look of that fish. I will fish for him.
Yeah, I've been terrible at planning stuff, terrible at acquiring tickets over the years. I just go with whatever I feel like at the time. And yeah, that was very much kind of one of those things. I remember talking to a few of my mates up north, and they were like, mate, you're mad. Like, why you're going to drive down to Swindon and sleep in the back?
That's a long old way, isn't it? That.
Yeah.
It sounds very impulsive. Very impulsive to decide to, because how long is that drive? That's still
3 and a bit hours from Manchester at least. Yeah. And I was just sleeping in my car as well. So I just had an Astra estate.
Of course, you had to do the days as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had an Astra estate, so I was just sleeping in the back of my Astra estate as well. But funny enough, Mike Wilmot was actually the first person that I bumped into on that first trip. He was in the infamous bus stop swim, and you could set up like on the concrete. There was basically like someone had taken a drill down and put raw plugs into the concrete, so you could actually screw onto the concrete basically. Or Mike was just sleeping. He just had his bed chair in the. I mean, it isn't a bus shelter. It just looks like a bus shelter.
Right.
He was actually like in the bus shelter with the fag ends and the broken glass and sort of everything else.
Classy.
Yeah, and it is like that as well. Like, I've got a photograph somewhere of a bottle of solvent. Local kids used to go down there, like sniffing solvent and stuff, banging the tunes out and what have you. It was a bit of a ropey place to be, really. But yeah, Mike's view was like, you're better off just kind of almost like not being mates with him, but just like the not being he's the angler, let's abuse him.
Yeah, just
kind of being there and just sort of, you know. And also Mike's pretty tough as well. I don't think he'd have taken any shit anyway. So so that was that. So I did the back end of that season. I think that was January when I started. That big in the resident always had good history for getting caught in the winter as well from down that end, which to be fair was probably the reason that I was there in hindsight. And fished it to the back end. and just lost one actually last week of the season in March, and then went back the following year and sort of kind of really got into it really that first year, but still only had the day ticket actually that first year. So
quite an investment of time then. Was this taking up a lot of your time? Was it a weekend thing, or were you down there a lot?
It was in between. So I'd left Cornwall, moved back to Manchester, and I spent about a year and a bit before I moved back down to Cornwall to do my teaching degree. So I was working at home in my studio, doing bits and bobs, doing a bit of freelance. What did I do in that year? I did the drawings for Terry's book for Still Searching actually that year. A few other bits of writing and stuff like that, just kind of a bit of freelance sort of angling work, working in my studio at home on my own artwork and that, and just doing a bit of fishing. So like I think I was probably doing, to be honest, actually out of all the spells in my life, it's probably the spell I've done the most like consistent week in, week out fishing. So I was probably doing like at least 2 nights, sometimes 3 a week, probably, I'd say back then.
All those nights sleeping in your car, or was that spent elsewhere?
Sometimes in the car, but I actually found it was more productive to just sleep in the park. So I'd just pack up, basically tuck myself away somewhere and just kind of crash in the park. But it was actually, it was just better because you were on the water already. You know, if they were crashing out during the night and stuff, you'd hear them. If I woke up in the night, you know, for a pee or whatever, I'd just have like a 15-20 minute walk down the bank and stuff and have a listen. And so I found it more productive in the end just to actually sleep on the bank next to the water rather than in the car. And also the car parks are well dodgy there.
Right.
Yeah. I got woke up by the police one night, didn't I? I heard this car pull up next to me. I was just asleep, tucked in the back, and it's pulled up right next to me. Empty car park. I'm like, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
3 a.m. or whatever. Like, why are they pulling up right next to me? Just, you know, and knock on the window, big beaming light comes through. I'm just like,
you don't know what it is. You don't know.
Hurt me.
No, I was like a worm on the pavement, just like, and then he shone it on his badge, and it was copper. He was just like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Fishing." Well, I'm not fishing. I'll be fishing tomorrow. Like,
almost sounds suspicious. When
totally. Yeah, and obviously I had my rods and stuff there. So he was a local copper, so he knew about the lake and stuff.
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Don't sleep in this car park. Like, do not sleep here. Sleep somewhere else. It's not a safe place to be, basically." So yeah, that was that. So there was a little house actually around the corner behind the little train. It's like a weird little train, like that runs around part of the park.
Right.
And there was a house back there that we used to park in front of in the end, and we just used to like give them a nice bottle of wine or something at the end of the year, and they didn't look after the cars, but they just, you know what I mean, they were happy with us parking on this little bit of scrub land in front of them and what have you. But yeah, it was interesting because I actually, in sort of fishing terms, to get back to that, I caught far more on the season when I only had my day ticket. The following year when I got my night ticket, didn't really catch anywhere near as much that first year when I was doing the days, because you could be so mobile with your fishing. I was often, say if I was doing 4 days, I'd fish like 4 different swims, 5 different swims. I was baiting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas and just flitting between them. And it was just a really, really good way to fish. And as soon as you chuck a bivvy and a bed chair into the equation,
got a bit complacent with it, and
inevitably you just don't fish the same. Even if you want to fish really mobile, it wasn't the same as being sat up on that damn wall every day with my barrow before first light, with 2 rods on the top kind of ready to go. You'd see a couple of shows. I'd have baited the previous day or the previous evening, 3 or 4 areas. Obviously they'd be the areas that I'd be watching the following day. See a couple of shows around there, a couple of stringers out, and
did you go back to that once you realised that the night fishing wasn't as productive, or was it?
You just couldn't,
right?
Because as soon as you were setting up for the night, there's always that, but I'll just fish through the bite time, or I'll just give it until the afternoon or something. And it was also a bit of a weird one there, because I was used to think, and in hindsight, it probably wasn't really safe enough to leave your kit and go and walk round. So if you wanted to go for a walk around, really, you had to pack up and barrow your kit round. Yeah. And then obviously, if you were in a good area, you were a bit reticent to leave because you're like, I'm in the dugout, I'm in the yard. Maybe they'll turn up this afternoon. So yeah, it just changed the dynamic. Yeah. Interestingly, but yeah, it's a really interesting few years fishing. Yeah, but it was a bit of a sketchy place.
I was going to say must have some stories of some of the goings on in the park. It's like urban fishing before urban fishing was cool. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'd never really fished anywhere like that either. You know, I had fished pretty sort of quaint Cheshire lakes.
Yeah.
You know? Even though Reedsmere felt a bit moody to start with, it was a very, very beautiful place. You know, it's an ancient, like thousands of years old mere, and they come with that particular sort of feel, don't they? Yeah, Coat felt vastly different. You know, using a drill to put raw plugs in to get your shelter up and stuff like that was really quite different. But yeah, so like all the bins got set fire to one night. Just these like massive torches. It was like seen from Lord of the Rings. Where they light the torches. Just like one went up, and then 5 minutes later, the next one's gone up. Like, set fire to all the bins. One of the lads got beaten up really badly one night, actually, fairly youngish lad. There was some guys were basically trying to break into there was like a cafe by the diving board, and some guys were trying to break into that, and he said something to them basically, and they just kicked the shit out of him, kicked most of his kit in the lake, made a bit of a mess of him, and so you know, I mean, I wouldn't say I ever felt in danger or anything fishing there, but it was just had a bit of an edge. Yeah, definitely.
Fair play, mate. You wouldn't have found me there. Dan knows all too well.
Alf's the worst with stuff like this.
I melt like a chocolate teapot in anything like that. Zips down. I'm not here. I
did have a couple of nights like that in the bus stop, actually, to be honest, where like a couple of big groups rolled up, and like they had the big ghetto blaster out, like cranking tunes out, just like all the empty cans getting thrown at the back of your brolly, and stuff, and just shouting and stuff, and usually just sat tight.
Yeah, Swindon card life, eh?
Pretend you don't hear it. And
VIP.
Yeah. And how did that all end then?
So it's funny really, because when I actually think about it, when I talk about it, I've kind of, even though carp fishing's always run through my life since I was like eight years old, I have had really big spells where I haven't done any. It's like been really like on or off.
100% or nothing.
100% or nothing, which to be fair is kind of how I am a little bit, I think, just in life in general. I'm not very good at moderation.
Right.
So I fished really hard during that spell. Was fishing the Park Lake in Swindon, and then I also fished Pingewood in Reading. I think it was like the second year. Basically, the park had a closed season on it. I wanted to fish somewhere basically just through the spring period, and had really fancied having a go on Pinge. Partly inspired by, there was an incredible old cover shot on an old big carp of a lad called Nathan Bailey, I think his surname was, with the jockey, which was the old Pingewood Bigham. Amazing fish, like 50-pound mirror. And one of the northern lads, a mate of mine called Gav, had caught it on a zig rig Brazil nut, of all things. I think that's the only carp I know.
Yeah.
Getting caught on a zig rig Brazil. Yeah,
very
really weird. But so it was kind of like a little bit of a link to the lake, and I'd seen and read a few pieces about it in some of the mags, seen that cover shot. It was an open access club ticket as well, which really was sort of the main thing. So had to go on there. Planned to start in sort of like late winter, early spring, February, March. Had a few things go on. My car broke down. Had a last minute 2-week surf trip to Fuerteventura. Then couldn't afford to fix my car, this, that, and the other. So kind of like spring just dragged on. And I remember I actually phoned, and it would have been, I didn't know him then, but it would have been Dell that runs Reading Club. Phoned the club, and I was like, I know there's only 6 weeks left to run on the ticket, but like, is there any chance I can have a sort of, half price ticket or something like that? I just want to fish it up until June the 15th. So they did me a half price ticket basically, which was sweet. So I just did 5 weeks on there. It was in the end, and I was still fishing the Park Lake, or planned to go back on June the 16th to fish Coat. So I was baiting it every week. So I was driving from Manchester to Swindon. I'd put 20, 30, 40 kilos in the park, drive to Pingewood, do my 2-3 nights on Pinge, drive back via the park. I was taking a lot of bait. It's probably the only time in my fishing life where I've used like a lot of bait. And my poor little Astrovan was just like
spot
a mud flap sort of down. With all the bait in the back. Yeah, so drive back past the park. Any that I had left, I put back in there, and I did that basically for the 5 weeks. And caught the brute unbelievably, really, on my last morning of the ticket.
Incredible.
Which was amazing timing. Really, couldn't have panned out better. And I was actually planning on staying on there because, to be honest, the park, it wasn't always the nicest place to fish. It was quite difficult. I still really wanted to catch the big one, but I was sort of starting to not really enjoy everything else that went with it. Whereas on the contrast, Pinge was just beautiful. Crystal clear water. You could get up trees. You could see them. You could find them. You could feed them. It was really quiet that year as well because the jockey sadly had died. Terry had caught the jockey the season previous, and it had died unfortunately shortly after. So the lake was just really quiet. Like all the kind of bounty hunters that were after that one had kind of drifted away. The brute was the big one that was left. It was still big. It was still upper 40s, but a lot of people that were after that 50-pounder had all just melted away. So the lake was really quiet. So it was a really nice spring to fish it, to be honest. So I had planned to stay there. So I was going to renew my ticket and do a bit longer. Going back to sitting on concrete banks and getting beer cans hurled at me didn't really seem that much of a fun idea.
Once you've had a few weeks on here, it was not too appealing.
Because I just had the run of the mill as well. Because there was only a handful of other people fishing it. And then I caught it on the last morning.
I remember reading actually, although you had the run of the mill, did you say you felt it made it a little harder at times because they were
really flighty. Going back to the Reedsmere thing, everyone on there was really mobile and the fish were quite nomadic on Reedsmere because when they got into the main body, it was just big, vast areas of silt and open water. There was nothing to really hold them, so they'd just drift around and they'd just be all over. So the lads that were catching regularly on reeds were the ones that were being really mobile. I'd sort of carried that ethos through all my fishing, I suppose, really kind of from there. But yeah, when I got to Pinge, it just didn't work. Like you'd see a few shows in the morning, put a couple of little 1 ounce leads out to them, and that'd be it.
Gone.
You'd just see nothing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
And then half an hour later, you'd see them showing 30, 40 yards away, a couple of swims down. So I chased them around for a few weeks. I did catch a couple doing that, but just didn't really seem like the way to do it. And so started fishing over big beds of bait and just settling into areas for kind of 2 or 3 nights. That sort of seemed to be the way to catch them on there.
Did you ever feel you were close to catching the big one? Was it in your mind that this could be a possibility, really? Or was it?
I'd only seen it. I think I'd seen it twice. It was always known for getting caught on the Moon, that one, and it had been caught on the previous full, which sort of would have been like when would it have been? Maybe like early May, maybe something like that. I guess it would have been. It had been caught, and then the next full came back round, and my mate Chris, Welsh Chris, I used to call him and fish with him on Coatwater. He sent me a text that evening because we kept in touch and stuff, and he sent me a text that evening saying, "Oi, brute moon tonight," sort of thing, and caught the following morning. But no, if I'm honest, I wouldn't say that I felt close to it really at all. I had caught fairly consistently. I caught on I think I caught every trip. A couple of trips I caught a couple, but hadn't really got into any of the bigger ones actually. To be honest, I caught like quite a few small, like 2, 3 cricketback commons. I'd caught. There's a really pretty small fully scaled in there. I'd caught another 2, 3 of the smaller mirrors, but I hadn't really got into any of the bigger sort of set of sort of the 18 mirrors, if you like. So it was a bit out of the blue, if I'm honest, really, but very welcome.
Yeah.
Job done as well.
And saved dragging it out. As much as I was enjoying it, I would have quite happily stayed there for,
like you say, time to perfection. So that was the last night on there, and then what it would have been the following day or 2 days later.
2 days later, yeah.
And you could go straight back down to Swindon and
went home, sorted my kit out, had a couple of bits of work I had to do, and then went back. So I think I left. I can't remember what day it was in the end, but I got to Coat the day before, so I would have got there on the morning of the 15th. No, must have been the 14th, the evening of the 14th, because I spent the night there with no rods out basically, and put them out at midnight the the following night. And one of the areas, I baited loads of different areas, but one of the areas that I had been baiting was this bay. And to be honest, it was a bit of a it was often a bit of a mirage to fish, because you'd see them in there regularly, but they were actually often really quite difficult to catch out of there.
Right.
But there was just, when I'd got there was just so many in there. The spot I'd been baiting was just alive with them. I was just literally throwing 18, 20 millers on their heads, and they were just like, so I was just like, I can't not fish here, or at least give it a go. And basically, long story short, it just didn't transpire. There was a coot's nest really near the spot, and for some weird reason, the coots just got really agitated that there was so many carp there and started attacking them. Really weird. I've never really seen it before, but they were actually chasing them out, like pecking their backs and stuff like that. Yeah, I was just stood on the bridge watching them. Trying to discourage the coots from doing it, but like, it was just nothing I could do. So I just kind of watched it sort of all unfold.
Mad.
Yeah, it was really weird. I've never really seen it before like that. But she had a nest there, and I think like it's almost just like she was being really protective, because she wasn't even really diving on the bait. She was just trying to get all the carp out of the area. It was strange. And anyway, so like morning of the 16th, it's sort of like, it's not a carp in sight basically in the bay. It's crystal clear. It's this dirty, great big bright yellow glowing spot, like where there was just loads of carp the day before. And a lad called Joe set up opposite, and they'd basically moved. He caught a couple actually that I photographed for him, but they'd obviously spawned not long previous, and there was no weed in there back then. So they just used to spawn up against the concrete walls and stuff like that, and they just used to smash themselves to pieces.
Really?
Like great. They get huge. A lot of them, if you look at the pictures of them, they've got great big deep scars down them, and they look great when they're healed, but not when they're a week or 2 week old. Yeah. So photographed a couple. They were well down in weight as well. One of them I recognised, and because I caught it the previous year, and I just sort of thought, actually, do you know what? Probably don't want to catch the big one at the moment anyway. So went home. I think I just did I don't know what I did actually. Just had sort of 3 or 4 weeks off, did some work, a little bit of local fishing, I think, back up north, and then went back down and actually caught the big one on that first trip back.
Oh, cool!
Unbelievably, quite random.
And a lot of the others, I guess you'd caught. Like you said, you're doing the days and you were dropping on them, a few baited areas, finding them. How was it the same catching that one, or did you have a different plan of attack for the resident?
No, well, I was. In a strange way, because unless you were fishing in the bay, you couldn't really sight fish for them. You couldn't really see them. There was always a tinge of colour in there back then when I was fishing. It's different now. It's got a lot of weed in it and it's a lot clearer. So you couldn't really sight fish them. So you sight fish for them. So you couldn't really target them in that way. There was obviously a couple of areas where it was kind of known to have been caught from over the years and stuff like that. But really, you just had to play the numbers game. You just had to kind of just keep getting bites, really, and just kind of wait for it to turn up. Or at least that's how it felt, really, anyway. And that was pretty much how it happened in the end. So it was an area that I'd fished quite a few times before. I caught quite a few that trip. I caught the little resident as well that trip. I caught another one of the big fish called two-tone. So I sort of, caught 3 of the big ones, really, that trip. But it was a bit of an odd one, really. Like, all the time when I was in the bay feeding them, the resident would never come in on the bait like the other ones. It'd always just hang back a little bit. Like, you'd never see it getting involved with all the others. They'd come right in. Some of them you'd see up on the ledge and stuff like that. And I only saw the resident once or twice in the bay, and it was always just ghosting at the back. You'd see it, and you could see the bulk of it. It was just different. It had a massively thick wrist on its tail as well. And it was kind of, mid-40s, upper 40s later in the year. So it was quite a bit bigger than quite a few of the others as well. And strangely, when I caught it, I'd put all 3 out like I always used to. There was a big weather front during that night. And for some reason, I don't know why, they were all set half an hour maybe after they'd gone in. I just went and picked one of my rods up, wound it in, put another 10 yards on the clip, put a new stringer on, checked my point and put it back out, just slightly longer and just off the back of the area. And that was the rod that did it. Yeah.
Just through seeing it ghost around at the back. And
I don't even think it was. It was
really?
just, no, I don't even think it was. Like, I didn't think, I only saw I always used to see the resident hanging at the back. I'm going to put one off the back of the area. I don't think it was. I think it was just a bit of a subconscious thing. I think it was because, actually, in hindsight, I think it was just because I felt it was such a big weather front coming in. Like, I think it was forecast to be like 35 mile an hour southwesterlies, really wet as well. And I was like, actually, I just think I want one in slightly deeper water, like, just off the back of it. And yeah, that was the one that
seemed to work.
Did it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I think sometimes just things happen like that. You don't always calculate it and premeditate, or I don't at least anyway.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Cool fish, the resident.
Yeah.
I haven't actually, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'm sure we'll overlay some photos of this onto the video and things.
Yeah, Wilmot's shot on the cover of Carp Life is that's the shot of it, really.
I know it's very sought after. I know there's a lot of anglers who've spent.
Yeah, it's called Carp. Yeah, it's a nice one. It was a nice one, and that's sort of like, it capped a really nice little spell in my fishing. Really, like I say, that was the time when probably really I've done more fishing than I ever had done. Targeted a couple of big uns. Both campaigns had kind of come off in pretty quick succession. I was like, this is good.
Yeah,
I like this album's looking good at this point.
Yeah. And then that was it again. So very shortly after catching, so that was basically, so I was due to go back to Exeter to uni to go and do my PGCE, which is the teacher training qualification, in the September. And I caught the resident in the July, I think it was. So spent the rest of the summer reading really heavy books on teaching theory, and art theory and stuff, and then moved back to Exeter.
Yeah, cool.
And sort of, again, that was it. Again, it was like big spell with no fishing.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, really.
Like you said, you're someone who throws 100% into everything that you're doing, and I guess when you've got something like your teacher training crop up, all focus goes into that, and fishing takes a bit of a backseat.
I did take my fishing kit with me, actually. Typically of me, and I think probably because I've been wrapped up in those campaigns and have been fishing pretty hard, I hadn't sorted out any accommodation to live in. Right. Stupidly, like, we've been sent all the birds.
You got an Astra, mate. You just
wasn't there? You're not far off the mark, actually. Been sent all the blurb like you get from the unis, big accommodation list. I remember looking through the accommodation list, and there was like 30 pages and stuff, and I was like, oh, that'll be sweet to sort out. I'll just get a shed house, whatever. It'll be, it'll just be no problem. Typically didn't sort it out until really late. Started ringing through all these numbers. Oh no, sorry, no rooms. Next one, no, sorry, no. Strike the next one off. Strike the next one off. Strike the next. Literally, there was just nothing, and I got this one little glimmer basically of a room, and long story short, basically I ended up living in this tiny. It was a box room with like a 3/4 bed, like a kid's bed, basically. But I didn't really realise what I was going to be getting. Basically, I thought I was going to be getting a proper room with a proper bed, as you do. And I've got there. My mate Tom helped me drive all my stuff down. So I had these plans basically that I was going to fish Exeter Canal. There's some really nice ones in there, like well off the radar. I didn't really know too much about it, but it sounded really exciting, clear, weedy, weird stretch. Like, you couldn't find any information about it, but I knew there was a few nice fish in there. So I was like, that sounds amazing. I'll just take a little day set up, like sort of thing. That'll be perfect. And then there was another lake, an estate lake called Showbrook, that my mate Martin Allerton, that I knew from back in the Reedsmere days, had fished. And there was 2 big commons in there. And again, they were kind of kept pretty sort of hush-hush, really. Unless you were in a sort of circle, you never really got to know about. I don't think there's anything ever been written about them. I forget how big they were, but they were like low to mid 40 commons, something like that. This is sort of like 2006, this would have been. So big fish for the time. You could just fish it on the days, sort of. So yeah, plan was to fish there. So like I say, my mate Tom's helped me take my stuff down, and I've sort of got all the paraphernalia and crap that I need to do, like, all sorts, like computer, printer, laptop, and then I've got all my fishing kit as well. And I've turned up, and she showed me to this room, and I was just like, oh shit. I was like, you're kidding me. I was like, so the door opened into the corridor because there was no room for it to open
into the room.
The room. So like my bedside table was a cardboard box with a printer on it. I had literally about 2 foot to swing my legs out of bed. The wardrobe, my wardrobe was in a different room. Wow. I had to squeeze my fishing kit in there because there was nowhere else to put it. It was this tiny little terraced place. I was like, shit, this is a nightmare. And then so that's how I started my my teaching career, feeling like I was in like a 12-year-old's bed. So weird. It was like I was just like, this is a disaster. Like, it's just to be organised and to have my shit together was just a nightmare. So literally, I didn't touch my fishing rods for the whole time, as they just got in the way. Basically.
Yeah. Were you there for the duration of your? Is it a year that you're there for? The extra year.
Yeah. You get placements in the second half, and I actually ended up. I managed to get a room in my mate's house that was living back down in Falmouth. Some of the guys that I knew from originally that had stayed there. I got a room at their place, so I was basically living in Exeter in this tiny box room during the weeks, and then going down to Falmouth for the weekend. They lived in this big, amazing place right on the front, overlooks like the Fal estuary, literally like a stone's throw. You could sit on the doorstep with a coffee, looking out over the Fal estuary, all the boats and everything. It was incredible. So I had like a weekend pad and a week pad. So I'd just bolt on a Friday, like as soon as uni had finished. I'd just bolt down there for the weekends, and so that was that. And then met Sarah, who is my wife now, on the teacher training course, and she's from Southampton. She did her placements in sort of Dorset, Somerset, basically. So yeah, long story short, we sort of ended up moving to the sort of Bournemouth area, and that's where I've been. Yeah, that's where I've been since. Yeah. So yeah, since.
Is Sarah a teacher as well?
Yeah, she was. Yeah. Yeah. Both quit a couple of years ago now. So.
Yeah. So obviously, from that you can take the teacher training was successful. You became a teacher.
Yeah.
And that was your career for the last how long? 12 years.
11 years I did. Yeah. Sarah did 12. She was there at the school because we both taught at the same school.
Right.
She was there for a year longer than me. The school was actually her placement school. So she got the job at the end of her placement, and then a part-time post came up the following year, which I took. And then just went from there really. But I loved it. It was amazing. Yeah. Really, really loved it. Yeah.
And so you started, correct me if I'm wrong, you started teaching art, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Started teaching art. And then ended up leading the photography course.
Yeah.
The A-level photography and the GCSE photography that we set up.
So it was all sort of secondary school teaching you were doing?
Yeah. 11 to 18. So I was quite lucky because a lot of it was sixth form, which was great. And
a bit mature, the students were at that point.
Some of the work they produced was just phenomenal.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, it was just incredible. Some of the stuff like still blows me away to this day, like the standard of some of the work that they were doing. It was amazing. There was a really good atmosphere in there as well. I think because they knew that we were really committed to it as a subject, we really pushed them, and it just all feeds back into itself, so there was a kind of, don't get me wrong, it wasn't always like that. Some of it was, like pulling teeth, trying to get 11-year-olds to draw whatever. They just hated it. But yeah, the vast majority of it, was really, really positive. And you were always learning as well. That was the thing for me as well. Obviously, I'd always done an awful lot of photography, but I'd never done any studio photography. And then suddenly I was teaching like big A-level workshops on studio photography.
Yeah.
So I'd just be there at home YouTubing stuff, learning how to do stuff, lighting patterns, this, that and the other, and going in the following day and teaching it like you'd been doing it for
20 years. Yeah.
But it's, so in that respect, it was amazing because I learned a hell of a lot as well. And
yeah, I can imagine.
Students would come to you all the time and they'd be like, "Oh, sir, I really want to do some shots like this. Or, I love this. How can we do this?" And I'd be like, "Not quite sure. Leave it with me." And you'd go away, do some research, come back the following day, and you'd be trying to, you'd be just trying to work it out, whether it was like high speed drip photography or something in the studio, or like new Photoshop techniques that I didn't know, or like really elaborate lighting patterns, or kind of whatever it was. It was so it was great. So no 2 days were the same, and it was great. Yeah, it was a real buzz.
Yeah, it sounds wicked. obviously you're a very established photographer. You've been doing photography for a long time, and like you say, you did teach it for a while. When did you get into the whole photography thing? Because like you say, you're an art teacher to start with. You must have been doing photography that whole time. Was it fishing that kind of brought you into it as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've just always, I don't really think there was ever a conscious moment. I think it was, I mean, it never, in some ways, it never really felt any different to me than the art. They're just the same, you know, you're creating something, making something to either try and sort of tell a story or capture some sense of like atmosphere or environment or something like that, and you're trying to communicate it to other people. So it was just a different vehicle for that, really. But I'd always loved like carp fishing photography. I'd just always been captivated by certain images, like stuff would just stick in my head. Certain shots always poured over the photos in old books and stuff like that. And so I think really it just grew from there. And then to be honest, I think actually in a way, I think teaching it for so long, like really cemented and pushed my love for it, because like I was learning about so much stuff, like so many different techniques, you know, new photographers, obviously all the A-level students are doing really in-depth studies in you know, into particular artists and particular photographers. So, you know, that was always pushing my, you know, my boundaries and interest, I think, with it as well. So just finding out about all this incredible, amazing stuff and just being inspired by it all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with art. It's not subjective, is it? It's there's no yes or no or right and wrong. It's not like maths, for example. Like,
yeah, totally.
I'm to be able to draw. I can't draw.
Yeah,
but I'd love, no matter how much I could practice, I wouldn't be able to. I'd be able to get better to a degree, but there's no way I'm ever going to go and replicate the Mona Lisa or something like that. Whereas my dad, for example, can just draw. You know, you give him to draw. Here's a photocopy of that, and it just works.
Yeah.
And I think, like, are you born with that? Do you think you're born with that skill? Because no matter, I'm still drawing. If I was to draw a person, it'd still be a stick man with feet.
Yeah, I think the thing. Yeah, I think there's definitely some inherent skill in being able to draw and being able to copy something. Say, for example, you know, you'll always see it at school. You'll get kids that are really good at replicating stuff. And even you would see that sometimes all the way through up till sixth form. You get students that were really, really good at replicating stuff, but that didn't mean that they were particularly creative or good. Like, that sounds like quite a harsh, blunt thing to say, but I always used to say to them, look, like, the things that are valued in the creative industries isn't being able to draw this picture perfect representation of what someone else has done. It's kind of a dead skill. That, like, people want to see people that have got like a personal voice and have got a different way of doing things, or have got a really weird, jaunty, like obscure kind of style. Like, that's what's valued. So, you know, we used to do an awful lot to sort of try and push students like out of their comfort zone and to get them to do different things, and actually to realize that it was okay for a drawing not to look like whatever it is in front of you. Like, there's 1,000 different ways that you can draw something, and actually a lot of those ways of doing it differently are actually more valuable than just being able to copy it, because no one wants.
Yeah.
No one's going to employ someone that can copy something really well.
Yeah,
we've got photocopiers for that now.
And it's these creative people that stand out now, especially with Instagram and things like that. If even away from fishing, even though he's with fishing as well. I mean, we notice when we're looking for profiles, like, you can, no matter how many times you think something's been done, there is always someone who comes along who's got their different spin on things.
Exactly.
Whether how out of the box that is, it's different. But even like there's,
and they're the things that are memorable, aren't they? That's what sticks in your mind.
100%. So it's just the top of my head now. Is this graphic? It's more graphic design, but there's this guy. I think he's called Ronald Ong. So I don't know exactly how to pronounce, but he uses everyday objects and photoshops them into these crazy, almost like creature-like things. But it's just so incredibly.
Yep.
It's just, I don't think it's anything serious knowledge of photo. You need to have a good understanding of it, but it's just, and I just think it's incredible, absolutely incredible as a creative piece of work.
Sometimes some of the simplest things can be the best as well. You know, sometimes the more complicated you make something visually, like the less engaging it becomes. Like, if you can sort of strip something back. But it's a funny one. So that kind of, I think that's the one thing that in a way, like, you can teach. I think you can teach that sort of creativity by encouraging students to do things in a vastly different way and not just ape stuff that obviously that, you know, that can be quite a good way to sort of learn basic skills, and to do certain things. But I think, you know, to sort of push ideas out of the box and do stuff that just feels completely unfamiliar, or you're like, what's this going to do if we do it? Oh, I don't know, no idea. Let's try it. Let's see where this goes. And then you kind of chase the tail of it to its logical conclusion. Sometimes you come out with something that's like absolutely shit.
Yeah.
And then other times it's amazing.
Yeah.
But you've got there in a organic sort of way that becomes something genuine, I think.
I'd love to be able to say, look how creative I was, but my mind is so much more number based and statistics based, because I look at these people and think they're so bloody cool, but I'm never ever going to do that in my life, because it's just not in there.
You'd be surprised.
I just don't think I could ever.
It's one of them, because you probably never tried. Like,
I was going to say, yeah, it's a skill like anything else. Like, you have to cultivate it. I think if you don't get me wrong, you definitely do get some people that are just incredibly naturally creative, and they kind of don't really have to think about it, and it's just kind of part of them. But I think you can definitely nurture it, you know, and you can definitely work on it and practice it like any other skill.
Like you say, when your students came to you and said, "What do you think of this?" It's like, well, you've just done this. Go and do something off your own back, and that, I guess, that's the learning bit. That's the trial and error bit.
I think for a lot of people, that's when it becomes terrifying, though.
Yeah.
Because then there's always a safety blanket when you're copying something. When you're aping something, there's always that safety blanket, isn't there? As soon as you're doing something that has got more of a personal voice and is a little bit different, that's when it becomes a bit more frightening, because you're like, oh shit, I don't know if this is any good, because
I've got nothing to gauge it against, or
it's original. So it's I mean, having some kind of like authentic voice is difficult. I mean, everything to some point is recycled. It's hard to find anything that is truly original. You know, you can trace most stuff back to some kind of origin. They'll have taken a little bit of inspiration from this, and a bit from that, and a bit from that, and a bit from that, put that all together with all their own, you know, thoughts and impressions, and
that is creativity. At the end of the day, it is taking all your experiences, all your sort of inspirations, and
and that's what's always driven me. I think personally, and that's what, you know, I really miss the teaching from that aspect, like the A-level students in particular. Like I say, some of them were just phenomenal. Some of them have gone on to do really, really well as well. One lad called Alex, he was selected one of the top 5 graduates by the British Journal of Photography last year. Yeah, he was one of my tutees as well. There was a big group of them. They just used to hang out in because my teaching room was the photography suite. Right. So it was sweet. It had like 24 Macs in it, great big curtained off studio. So it was a really, really nice room to have as my tutor base. And I had a sixth form tutor as well. They were all they were all the party kids as well. They were all the ones going like to best, like, you know, they were out all the time. Yeah. They loved it, but they worked really hard as well. And yeah, they just lived in there. Like they weren't in the common room hanging out with all the others. Like they would just be in the Mac suite, processing, editing, shooting more stuff. Like, so it was real. But yeah, quite a few of them have gone on to do good stuff, awesome. Which is always really nice to see.
Yeah. Imagine. So when you first got into your teaching, I think probably one of the highlights of your career in angling is probably the Carp Lake.
Yeah.
Must be.
Yeah, in some ways, I would say. It's funny, isn't it? Like
I did read one quote which I thought was quite funny. I can't remember the name of your mate, but he said to you, "Don't let it ruin you."
Yes.
And then I read through the article and he said it again. You mentioned it at the end.
Yeah, Hampshire Graham, it was. Yeah. I bumped into him, Vinitro, it was, down Chichester Way, down on the south coast. It was the sort of spring before I started on the car park. And I knew that he'd fished. He's a really good angler. He sort of always kept himself out of the limelight for years and stuff. But I knew that he'd fished there, so we were chatting about the place, and I said that I was going on there, and he was just like, "Don't let it ruin you." It's ruined so many people, because it's difficult to go anywhere after that. And I didn't really know what he meant by it at the time, and I sort of I mean, I think I do now in a way. I mean, I've definitely got massively fond memories about it as a spell of angling, partly because of the lake and the fish, but to be honest, more than anything, really, because of the lads I think that were on there at the time.
That seemed to be a big part of it, was the social side of it, not just the fishing side of it.
Massively.
I think also the thing is, the reason I say it must be such a pinnacle, because there's a lot of people of my generation, and probably actually a little bit younger than me, where the car park is kind of now, can't think how to put it, but they will never get that chance to it's been and gone sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? It was such a big part of carp fishing for, I think, such a long time, and such a what's the word for it? Just sort of an inspirational place. But,
I mean, it was from the era, wasn't it, when there was hardly any big fish around?
Yeah.
You know, Heather and Basil and that were part of those 40-pounders when there was, you could still count the amount of 40-pounders in the country on one hand. So I think in lots of ways, I think they probably only really became, or, you know, they came to have the kind of sort of history that they had, because they've been around for so long, and because if you wanted to fish for the biggest fish in the country back then, in the sort of 80s, 90s, sort of into the sort of early 2000s, you know, they were, you know, there wasn't many options, basically. So I think it was that probably really more than anything.
Yeah, to
and
add
also
to,
because of the long list of people that had fished there.
Of course, yeah. And I think, but the long list of people who fished there has only come about because it was such a rare and unique place at the time, and that just doesn't really exist anymore, I don't think.
No, I mean, you know, in some ways, I think that whole era of carp fishing has gone,
and it will never be replicated. Ever again.
No. And you know, you could sit and look through your rose tinted glasses all day long, couldn't you? And you could sit and bemoan that, which plenty of people do. Or you just realise that, you know, there's a lot more to carp fishing than that. Yeah. And there's 1,000 incredibly exciting, interesting places to go and angle. And you just, you know, you get on with your fishing, and
it might be slightly different, and it might not be quite the same as it was, but
everywhere's I think everywhere is different. And I think, you know, memory does strange things, doesn't it? You know, you only remember the bits you want to remember.
Yeah.
You know, the human brain's very good, isn't it, at filtering out like the bad shit usually, and you know, you only remember the good things, and you know that's how we sort of move forward, isn't it, as humans? But yeah, it was an amazing place to fish, like I say, and but I think more than anything, don't get me wrong, like obviously the carp were amazing, and it was, you know, I never really thought I'd get the chance to fish for them, because Basil died when I was at uni, and then the car park lost a couple as well, Uglo, Chunky and Single, in pretty quick succession. I think, I can't remember the year, but I was still living in Cornwall back then, and I sort of, like, I remember hearing about them, and I was just kind of in my own little world in Cornwall doing my thing, and I remember just sort of thinking, that's it, I'm never going to get the chance. I'd always really wanted to go and fish there, like always dreamt of going and fishing there since being a kid. Something about it, again, just kind of captivated me. Some of the early writings, just, I don't know, it just seemed to have a slightly different atmosphere about the place.
Yeah, and I think you still get that now. Even like if I read about it, it still has that atmosphere and that glow, but
I don't know whether it actually does. Like, in all seriousness, like I think there's definitely something about the way that people write about places that goes towards cultivating a sense of what they become in the mind's eye of people that have never fished there. Like Reedsmere, for example. Like Paul Selman wrote about it in his book. That was the only thing really that I'd ever read before I went on there, and he talked about it in a very particular way. Like, you got there and it wasn't the same. It wasn't really like that.
Yeah. So in my mind's eye, the car park is always such a particular place, and I've got my vision of, you know, I've never even been there. I don't know what it looks like. Do you know what I mean? It's this thing in my head, but I guess like I know that I will never be able to go and fish for those fish and have that atmosphere and those socials. So I think that's what I was getting at, is you were able to go and do it.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, eternally grateful that I did. Again, that was a bit of a kind of weird spur of the moment thing as well, really. I was fishing roach pit at the time, and just really purely by chance, through no kind of calculation, I ended up with a Samex Gold card, and I remember it dropping through the door, and and thinking, I was like, shit. I was like, I can go and fish, like, because Cemex had such a big portfolio of waters back then. It had everywhere.
I still remember their website.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal what they had. I just remember thinking, oh my God, I've got a gold card. And
just pull your mic a little closer. You've just turned a little bit.
I was like, I'm going to go and fish the car park. And that was, so that was that. And in hindsight, I was really lucky that I did it when I did it, because if I'd waited 2 or 3 more years, it was gone. Yeah, it was all over really. Like, I fished the first 2 years. It was all still intact. The 6 big mirrors were still in there and what have you. And then in my 3rd year, Heather died, Pearly Tail died that year, and then the year after, I can't remember what order they went in. But yeah, for the first 2 years, it was all kind of still, it was still intact, really, of as it was. And it was just a really good year in terms of who else was fishing it as well. Right. Like a good group of lads that were really like-minded, similar sort of age group-ish. And it just had a really good vibe about it. Even though it was probably one of the busiest lakes I've ever fished, it just didn't have that feeling or sense of a busy lake. Like, you never saw any there was no animosity. No one was trying to stitch anyone up. There was no bitching. There was no politics.
Yeah.
There was just none of that.
All anglers with the same goal, getting on as they should.
And that actually isn't a rose tinted view of it.
Right.
That is actually how it was. It was like everyone was, bar 1 or 2 little minor things. Like everyone was just getting on. Kind of was just like one big happy. There was all the usual banter and stuff like that. People winding each other up and this, that, and the other. And but yeah, it was an amazing atmosphere. And some really, really good anglers on there. A lot of lads as well that I'm still really, really good friends with now as well, that I didn't know before I fished there.
So once that ticket come through the door and you realised, this is real. I am going to be fishing the car park lake. How did you feel? Were you intimidated at first?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, even though I'd done a lot of carp fishing by that point.
From what you spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been carp fishing for like 15. No, when would it have been? I started on there in 2008 or 9. So I'd been carp fishing for nearly 20 years, I suppose, by that point. But yeah, I did. I still remember like clutching my sweaty key in my palm, like as I got to the gate. And I don't really know what I expected to find, but same as any other carp lake, I think you have this impression of it in your mind's eye, and you turn up there and it's just lovely, and it's the same as anywhere else. Like, it's just a bunch of guys sat behind rods trying to catch some fish, and quite quickly got to know a few of the lads and what have you, and just went from there. Like, I remember the first morning I did the classic tuck myself away in the shit, swim on the lake for my first night. I didn't even walk around.
Oh, really?
No, which seems like hilarious, seems like preposterous, really, like not to do that. But I kind of didn't really care. That first night, I was just a bit like, it was quite busy. I got the impression that there wasn't really too many options. Saw a couple of fish in the gate snag, which is, it's like almost in the car park. Like, you turn up, you park in the car park. The gate swim is literally where you're sat there, pretty much, and the gate snag is like 20 yards way around the corner. Spoke to the guy in there, see a couple of fish in the gate snag, and I was like, for the first night, sort of, that'll do, really. I fished in this swim called the Middle Secret, which, just from kind of reading all the stories over the years, I knew wasn't one of the most productive swims on the lake. But it seemed like a logical point that they would come if they were in that snag, basically, to get down to the end secret, which was down to my left, and got the rods out. And I knew from an old story that there was a little bar somewhere out in front. 3 or 4 casts, found this little bar, sweet, couple of rods on it, one on a tiger nut, one on a boilie, couple of pouches over the top, and sat back, sort of thing.
I'm in.
Yeah. I was like, I'm fishing the car park. I was like, geez. And I expected it to be incredibly boring fishing. I think from some of the stories that I'd read, I just expected it to be like pretty slow, just like a battle of attrition, really. You're just kind of seeing it through.
Because just stock wise, how big was it and how many were in there?
So it's like 8 or 9 acres.
Yeah.
And you had six mirrors when I fished it. So Heather, Pearly Tail, Dustbin, and
big and little.
The
big orange. Is
Yeah.
it big orange, little orange?
Yeah, an Alpha.
An Alpha.
So he had 6 mirrors, and I think about a similar amount of commons.
Yeah.
From memory, I'm not sure. No one really seemed to know too much about the commons, or they just didn't keep track on numbers, same as because they were quite a lot smaller. Apart from one actually that I caught in my second year, that was £36, but at the time that was quite a lot bigger than it had ever been before. I think it might have only been like 32, 33 or something before. It's gone on to do 41, I think 42 now, that one. So yeah, I kind of just anticipated that you wouldn't really see much. You wouldn't find them very often, you know, and you'd spend a lot of time just waiting, really. But actually, it was anything but. You saw them all the time.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, you saw them all the time.
Jumping or just noticing them?
You didn't see that many shows. You see the odd, like, lazy head and shoulder. And what was mad on there was when you did see a set of head and shoulders, you could pretty much tell which one it was as well.
Yeah.
If it was within about 30, 40 yards and it, and it cleared it past its pecs, you could tell which one it was.
Teasing you as they come out of the water.
Yeah, because they're pretty distinctive as well. Like Heather was really grey, Dustbin had its really distinctive shoulders and was always really dark. Like the Baby O was just a different shape to the others, more classic, longer proportioned one. Arthur was just like big and fat and round, big creamy belly. See that show a couple of times. That was just like unmistakable. But yeah, so you saw them all the time. Like I say, not shows that often. Massive sheets of fizz in the morning, like huge sheets of fizz, size of 2, 3 on hooking mats, stuff like that. And you'd see them in the snags quite often as well, but not all of them, only certain ones. So you'd see the Baby Orange and Pearly Tail in a couple of the snags like all the time, like every day for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. The Baby Orange would be in the same snag, and then it'd disappear for a little while, wouldn't show up. Maybe Pearly would be in there for 2 or 3 weeks and stuff like that. So you always felt close, even though it was really, it was quite slow fishing. You always felt close to them. And that first morning, so I woke up first morning and big sheet of fizz comes up on the bar, and I remember thinking, Jesus,
they're here.
Like, massive liner, like, all the way to the top. Tips like pinged down for a second and then just fallen back slack. And I was just like, oh my God, I had a heart attack. I had like 4 or 5 massive liners that morning. And I remember I just turned my back just to walk back to my body to go make a tea. And one's just wallowed out on the bar. I've turned round. It was flat calm morning. Massive set of rings ebbing out off the bar. And I was just thinking, Jesus Christ, like I could actually catch one. And then obviously it did, and it ebbed away. And the second morning didn't see a thing, and sort of, but yeah, I mean, I caught quite quick. I caught the Dustbin on my 5th night. Yeah. And then a common on my 6th morning.
Did you have a preconceived idea of how you're going to go in and fish it? Or was there a kind of a done thing which was catching them, or?
Yeah, I mean, everyone was using bait boats, right? Pretty much. That year, I think the first year, there was only really me, Lee Picknell, and Jim Carpenter, who were casting, sort of give or take. Pretty much everything else was sort of bait boat. So everyone was dropping like big 5-ounce flat inlines, short links, little balanced tigers, that sort of thing. And again, like I never really premeditate or calculate anything. I just sort of turn up and do, I suppose, kind of what feels right. I didn't really know, because I didn't really know any of the other guys that were fishing there until I started. So I didn't really know what everyone was doing. So I just did what I've been doing everywhere else, really. Yeah. And so I was using. Everyone seemed to be using either just boilie and hemp, or just tiger and hemp. That seemed to be and fishing like a tiger over tiger or boilie over boilie. So and a lot of people, because they were using the boats, a lot of people were just fishing tiny little traps, like a couple of handfuls or just a handful and whatever. And I just felt like they were big fish. They clearly knew what bait was. They ate bait, but they were just incredibly adept at not getting caught. So I just felt like if you only had a tiny trap out there, if that got sprung, it just wasn't enough to actually get them to really kind of get stuck into it and actually get to the point where they might make a mistake. Or that was how I felt, in my head anyway. So I just started. It was a bit shit or bust really, so I just started loading it up with loads of bait.
Yeah.
But I remember being slightly apprehensive about that because obviously I was doing it with a marker and a spod. It's like a couple of hours spodding whilst the lads were putting it out with a boat, and they'd be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, float out to a spot they knew, check it, pop the float, out with the boat, drop it in a couple of inches behind the float, and I was just like, shit, how can I compete with that?
Yeah.
But I caught 5 that first year.
Yeah.
1 mirror, 4 commons, which sort of
and you say dustbin was your first
first bite. Yeah.
One of the A team.
Classic first blood.
Yeah.
Quite a few people have caught that as their first, yeah.
And I guess if you're kind of geared up for this, could be a long old season, maybe a bite would be good. 5th night in,
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, a little bit further down the line, I remember someone sitting and calculating roughly how many nights were going in between everybody per bite, and it was like 70, 80 nights.
Jesus.
Over the course of the year for the 12 mirror captures or whatever it was. Like if you sat and calculated it, it's like that's what the rod hours were. Something crazy.
Yeah.
Like that. You just better not to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be in my back of my mind all the time. I just have to go, nope.
Yeah.
Out of the mind. Just think, but what if?
Yeah. So I don't know what it was really. But I mean, that first year, I think I did about 20 odd nights, but caught 5. So yeah, had a really good first year. I sort of caught pretty consistently really up until October. I think I caught the last one of the year actually. That first year, it was like pretty sure it was like first week of October. That was the last bite that year. And then following year, caught heather and pearly tail in sort of fairly quick succession.
Yeah.
Did
you have a goal? Sorry, did you have
a
fish in particular, or just wanted?
For me, it would have been the dustbin. That was always the one that I really wanted to catch. Definitely. So kind of 5 nights in, I was just a bit like, I'm
on
done.
to the next one, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was. I can't remember. I'd fished quite hard that spring on a few other places. I'd fished Vinitro. I did a little bit on Roach Pit. Did a little bit on Nutsea as well. So I had fished quite hard that spring, and so then I'd then done like whatever it was, 3-4 trips up to the car park, something like that. Caught those 2, and it got to the point. Like it always happens to me. I'll kind of like fish hard for 2 or 3 months. Everything else in your life starts falling apart. Like in the background, like the unopened letters, the unanswered emails, just the shit you need to sort out. So I then end up having to have a break, basically. So that's usually been my script throughout most of my life, really. I fish hard for a short spell, then have a month or 2 off, something like that, basically. And so that was exactly what happened there. So yeah, caught the dustbin in the common, and then basically didn't go back for most of the summer. Instead of carrying it on through and thinking, obviously this sort of seems to work, kind of got my foot in, caught a couple, try and kind of see it through as a roll. I was just like, right, I need to sort out a load of stuff, basically. So yeah, didn't really fish for the summer, and I think went back, might have even been early September, I think. And then pretty much just picked up where I'd left off actually. I don't know whether it was just a bit of good fortune or what, or if it was because I was casting, so inevitably I was fishing differently because I was baiting differently because a lot of people were using boats. I was putting quite a lot of bait in, and I was massively washing out and pre-soaking my boilies as well because it had a 48-hour rule on it back then.
Right.
That was kind of one of the big things about it, really. It had a 48, and then you couldn't return for 72. So I could only do a couple of nights a week anyway. So it was perfect. So even though it was, in some respects, it felt like it could have been the hardest lake in the country, you felt like you were on a level pegging with anybody else because there was no one else sat there for 6 nights a week.
I quite like that rule.
Yeah.
Where I fish at the moment, and it works.
It's great. Yeah, it's great. And I think I've always been really happy fishing places like that. Reedsmere was the same. That had a 48-hour rule on it. You could stay on the lake, but you had to move. So you could do 48 in one swim, but then you had to move to another swim. Yeah. And you couldn't go back to the first swim you were in for 72.
Right.
So again, I'd kind of always been used to that. And yeah, I like it because it's a level playing field. I hate turning up at lakes and just knowing that there's areas stitched up for 5, 6, 7 nights, knowing that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
And just being like, well, there's just no chance of getting in there.
Which then can turn into weeks and weeks and
well,
weeks,
it does, because it'll be lined up for whatever day. Someone else is going to follow them in and such. So you kind of have to write those off. But yeah, the car park wasn't like that because of the 48. So it was perfect, really. You had a really good weekend crew. You had lads that fished a couple of nights during the week as well. And it was great, really. But yeah, what was I talking about? Yeah, the bait thing. So because you had fresh bait going in every 2 days, I was using loads of hemp, basically boiling it up. So like, as once the hemp had split and it's boiling, I'd put my, whatever it was, 2 kilo boilie, something like that, stick it in the hemp with the tiger and everything else when it's hot, seal it up, and I'd do that sort of 12 to 24 hours before getting down there. By the time I got to the lake, the boilie would just be like, just completely full to the core with hemp water. And it was swollen, it was pale, it was super soft. And I'm sure they just ploughed through it so much quicker, because I just think they thought it had been in the lake for 2-3 days already.
Yeah.
And a few of them, to be fair, in fact, actually 3 of them, I caught pretty quickly after putting a massive bucket out as well.
Right. Yeah.
Which led me to believe that they were just getting stuck straight into it.
Yeah, not being that cautious on it.
Yeah.
Like you said with Swindon, it was kind of just going through the numbers. I always got the impression with car park, you could angle pretty well for any of those particular mirrors, and you could sort of target them quite individually as to where they got caught from, where they were, where they lived. I know you mentioned already that like Pearly Tail was always in that snag. Like, you could target them a lot more efficiently than...
Massively so. Yeah. More so than any other lake that I've fished before, definitely. They used to print out a list in the Angling Centre of the captures each year.
Oh, right.
They just used to blue tack it inside the window, and every time someone caught another one,
yeah,
they'd pull that one down, add it to it on the computer, and print out a new one
for all to see.
It was only like
madness.
Yeah. I mean,
cool though.
Yeah,
cool idea,
yeah, really, really cool. And it wasn't like they were wasting loads of paper, because there was never more than 20 captures a year. Yeah. So, when I first started fishing there, I spoke to Kingy and said, "Can you print me off the last like half a dozen years?" And he was like, "Yeah." So they kept them all saved on the computer.
Yeah.
So he printed me them all out, and I just took them had them in my rucksack, basically. And when some of the older school lads were still going down there all the time, just drinking tea and socialising and stuff like that, I would ask them, I'd be like, this capture of Heather in September, because it had the date. So I think it just had, from memory, it was the kind of the captor's name, the date, the weight. I think that might have been it. I think it was just those 3 bits of information. So I'd find out the swim it had come from, see if I could find out anything else about, it was over, masses and masses of hemp and tiger, that one. He'd done, whatever sort of. So just trying to piece it together.
Yeah. Trying to find patterns in it. And
yeah. So that was really quite useful. But to be honest, there was no need to do that. It wasn't rocket science. It was like, if you wanted to target like Heather and the dustbin, it was 3 of the middle areas really were the best place. Like Pearly Tail and the Baby Orange, really, it was all about the gate snag. So it was like, they were really, really defined areas. And once you'd caught one, you could then write off great big areas of the lake, and then
almost going to a different lake and targeting a different fish. You could go and do
completely,
something.
Yeah. So because I caught, I started off targeting the open water areas, because really, kind of any of them were in the equation. Right. Really, you could, like, some of them did the odd bite from sort of anywhere. Some of them just never did bites from areas, like, ever. And some of them had really strange patterns as well. Like Arthur had rarely been caught from the same area more than once or twice. There was only one area of the lake, Brute's Corner in the Chair, where it had done a few captures from. Like the whole rest of the lake, it only had it had done like 1 or 2 from the islands, one from Trumptons, one from here, one from like. So yeah, some of them had really strange, and like Heather hadn't been caught from the bars for years and years and years, even though the bars spots were only 20 yards from the spots in the Curly. She hadn't been caught from there for years and years. You think there's rigs on there every day of the week,
and it's not a massive water. Yeah, it's a small.
You get up the tree and you can see the spots from the tree, and you're like, "There's the bar spots. There's the Curly long spot. Like, how has she not been caught from there for like 8 or 9 years? But she's been caught from there." And she would, like, Heather did things as well, like where she'd never be caught, or like pretty much never be caught from the same swim, certainly not in the same year, but rarely in the year after as well. So if she'd been caught from the curly the previous year, you could pretty much write that off for 12 to 18 months.
Right.
And stuff like that as well. Yeah. So, so because the first 2 I caught really were sort of classic open water fish, dustbin and heather, I just didn't really fish the open water again, really for a good while. Concentrated on the snags, and caught pearly tail and the baby O from the gate snag, which were both classic sort of gate fish.
Just before we go on to that, 'cause there's a point I want to talk about with the snag fishing. But how did you go on to tell us the story of Heather and how you went to catch her?
So I can't really remember. It was fairly close to the start of the season. I can't really remember the sort of the previous sort of few weeks build up to it, but I do remember that trip, and I remember the forecast being really, really hot. So Heather was always known for getting caught in the hottest weather. She'd often do a bite on the hottest day of the year.
Right.
Completely counterintuitive. We always used to say that they were solar powered. I don't know if it's because they're quite old fish or what. I don't really know what it was. They just seemed to. They were quite happy getting caught off sort of the bars, high pressure, sun, warm. I think partly in hindsight, actually, it might have been because it was so weedy and because the way the spots were, a lot of the swims, you didn't really have options for where you could fish. Like, they were the spots. The rest of it was just a forest of Canadian. You'd get up the trees and you could see the line layout to the spot at the end of it, like a lollipop. But that would be it. The whole rest of the swim was just Canadian. Some swims only had one spot in, really, or one good spot. Often the second rod was a bit of a token gesture at times. And so I knew that the forecast was going to be really hot. And the spots in Tromptons are sort of some of the shallowest, really, on the lake. It's got a raised hump smack bang in line with this pylon. And I just had a feeling that she was going to get caught from sort of somewhere around that area, kind of one of those couple of spots. But because of the weather, I just thought it was going to be there. So I'd actually got down the previous evening, crashed in my van in the car park to make sure that, because the other rule on there was that you couldn't drop a bucket in a swim until 4 a.m. on the day that you were going to start. So again, just to kind of keep it fair, and really nobody abused that either. So you couldn't turn up the night before or 2 days before and drop a bucket in. Had to be 4 a.m. on the day you started. I was up early anyway, and went in Tromptons, put a big hitter bait out right on the top, on the cleanest bit of the hump. It's not a massive hump, like maybe the size of a brolly, but sort of squashed,
right? If
you like, slightly more ovaled, and some of it's pretty chunky. The gravel, it's all like incredibly clean, but some of it's pretty chunky, and then there's just a bit on the top that was just completely just glassy and clean, but not like you're talking about a foot or two, something
really
like that.
That tight.
So put a big hitter bait on it, and nothing really happened for the first sort of 36 hours, and then I just started getting liner after liner after liner on my last morning. I had to go home because I was going to Glastonbury that weekend.
Right.
So it would have been Friday. It was Friday morning, and it was Friday morning. Like, I think from about 2 a.m. the line had started. I must have had a dozen, like right up to the top and back down. Like every single one you thought was away.
Yeah.
I was just like on tenterhooks and it's mad. I remember I just fired my Coleman up. James Davies had turned up for a tea. He was going to follow me in, so his bucket was already behind me. He was basically rubbing his hands together, waiting for me to leave, and just fired the Coleman up, and it just burst into flames. My Coleman, just like flames pouring out of the Coleman. I remember I just kicked it away. I mean, James was just stood looking at this like burning Coleman, just like, fuck, you better go and get yours out of the van. And it's just ramped off, like just tipped down. So I've always fished really tight clutches, and just like set up just lockdown solid. Always liked a really, really tight clutch. So if you've got your tips up at all, it's just like a classic, like one of them. And I just picked it up. It just flat rodded me, just like 20 yards probably or something. I just couldn't even get the rod up straight. And then it's just lodged down in the weed. I've just leant into it. And James has just looked at me and he's just gone, go for the boat. That's a proper one.
Oh.
And he just legged it really quickly, got the boat, got the jackets. Thankfully, a lad called Gareth, he was a bailiff. So he was on the lake at the time. You couldn't use the boat if there wasn't a bailiff on. So really handily, he was there, which was brilliant. James came round and we were in the boat really in no time. And he'd done loads of boat work on Raysbury, so he was amazing to have at the helm. Basically, it's like I'd seen a couple of disastrous boat battles on there.
Yeah, I bet.
People spinning around, like just getting in all sorts of trouble because whoever it was that was, on the oars basically just couldn't control the boat properly. But yeah, James was amazing. And it was just stalemate for the vast majority of it, to the point where it was almost like not pulling for a break, but there was just no give. It was just like it was hooked in like a branch or something.
And at this point, did you know it was still on, or at this point
no,
it was just solid?
Didn't have a clue, just didn't have. And I'd wrapped it around my hand and I'd held it for as long as I could, and there was just nothing, just no give. And I was like, it's gone, mate. I was just like, thanks. And James, he put the oar down and just started plucking little bits of the Canadian away with the oar and just lifting it away, just bit by bit. I don't know, 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes of that. And then suddenly just that, and I was just like, and I was just lifting, and you're just waiting, aren't you, for that thud back.
Is it my mind playing tricks for me, or is
it was just like it was just the weed to start with. It was just the give, and it was just like, and then suddenly I just felt it just go, just pull back, and I was like, fuck, it's still on, and just carried on lifting, and she's just come up flank on onto the boat, like bigger than that table, massive grey, solid flat, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, and she's just turned and righted herself. And she was known for rucking as well. Like she always fought. And she's just righted herself and just gone like that massive bow wave. And I still had the line in my hand to start with. So like, thankfully it's just come off my hand. I've grabbed my rod. It was round my tip, wasn't it? So I'm fucking around trying to get it and then she's lodged up in another bit. And then that basically repeated itself 3 times, but we knew it was her.
Oh my God.
For
I would have been
minutes.
shitting my pants. I don't know how you, in your mind,
strangely, in hindsight, I did actually feel pretty calm about it in hindsight. Cause I think you're so you do end up in that moment. And thankfully I was hasn't always been like that with some fights, like with the dustbin, for example, because that was my first bite. The whole time I was just like, oh my God, please don't fall off. Please don't fall off. Yeah. I just want to land this more than anything in the world.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't focused. But for some reason with that, I was actually. I was pretty, it just didn't really, it all felt a bit surreal, really nice. And I don't know if you know James Davies at all, but if you've ever met him, he's like the calmest human being in the world.
Helps.
He's just so calm. He was so unfazed by it.
Yeah.
And he was brilliant with the netting as well. It's got to that point where she's wallowing 30, 35, 40 minutes down the line as well. It was from start to finish. And she's just wallowing. And as you know, in a boat, it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? Just to get in the right spot.
Every time that net goes out, the boat
you're
comes
just
back.
They're just pushing. You're just pushing away. But James has just got the oar in one hand, the net in the other, and he's just taken 2 big scoops forward like that with the boat. And
I've seen it. I've recently watched the footage.
Have you? I haven't seen it for years. I lost it.
Really?
I lost the DVD with the footage on.
I was going to say, we'll get that off here and we'll play it over the top.
I don't know where it is. I gave it to Corda.
Yeah, it was on a Thinking Tackle, I think. We saw it. Yeah, but
I gave it to Corda when it was on the Thinking Tackle, but I never. That was a copy of it.
Right.
So they didn't lose it or anything like that. I lost my master copy.
Really?
Somewhere when I moved house, I think. And
if people want to watch it, go on YouTube.
I think it's still there. I haven't watched it for years.
Like I say, I remember him just like you say, now it makes so much sense when you say he's the calmest person ever, because he's just like,
that was I noticed that as well. Skillful.
Yeah,
really pulled yourself in and just went, yeah. And then the cry.
Yeah, the big shout. Yeah, had to be done, didn't it? Yeah.
And you can hear it even in the video echoing around the trees. And
to be honest, sort of it was incredible. Like when you relive it, when you tell it like that. And especially I think for them sort of fish that you've dreamt about catching for years.
Grown up dreaming about as well, like
reading all the stories, reading mailing stories from being 16, 17 years old. Like sort of Basil's Bush was one of the first books that I read, and that had a massive impact on me, shaping you know, my desire to want to go and fish for them sort of fish, definitely. Books like Basil's Bush and then obviously In Pursuit in the late 90s, definitely shaped what I wanted to fish for, and I think also probably how I wanted to fish.
Right.
I think as well, like that idea, that sort of romantic idea of chasing one fish or a small group of fish, you know, and generally difficult ones, and kind of everything that came with it, you know, the adventure and the challenge of setting your stall out against those for whatever it took, whether it was 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons. Those books and sort of all that old writing definitely seeded that for me.
Yeah. Obviously we've got through sort of, like say 10, 15, 20 years of carp fishing at the moment. Another massive passion of yours was and is biking. Was that always running alongside the carp fishing at the same time?
Yeah. So I raced motocross from being, I would have been, can't even remember how old I would have been when I started, 14, 15. So I raced through schoolboys up to sort of adult 125, so for like six years. And then I tore my cruciate in my left leg. Had that operated on, and that was sort of shortly before I went to uni. So that was kind of like a natural end really to the racing, to the motocross anyway. I'd always ridden BMX and mountain bike as well when I was a kid. It just sort of, you know, they all went together. Funny story actually. So one New Year's Eve, this is when I was fishing Reedsmere. It would have been 98, 99, I think maybe probably. For some reason, I decided that I wanted to fish New Year's Eve. Like, absolutely no idea why. My mates had been like, "Gee, you can't do that." I was like, "I can. That's what I'm going to do." I was like, I want to see the new year in at the lake." And they were just like, "What, on your own?" No. And I was just like,
no fireworks.
Yeah. So anyway, so I went fishing. I'd set up the previous day, done a night. New Year's Eve morning, they've just turned up at the lake. So they just found where I was. They'd never been to the lake before. I'd never seen them at the lake.
Yeah.
They just found me and turned up. I think they'd been to my house because this was sort of pre-mobile days really as well. So they'd been to my house, spoke to my mum and dad. They were like, "Yeah, if you park there and walk over this stile and that, like, he'll be down there." And they just packed my kit up. They just started taking my pegs out. Yeah. Yeah, like one of them was, so my mate Tom was talking to me and trying to persuade me, and then I've looked round and Ed, his older brother, is just taking my pegs out, and they literally just packed me up and took me to London and went to this mad house party for the night. But yeah, they were the lads that I always rode with. And
right.
So yeah, rode for years. Didn't so much when I went to uni, because then really it was just all about the coast and the sea and surfing for a good while, and then I sort of picked it back up again. I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. And I never really had any desire to race motorbikes again, particularly, just because it's so expensive. It's a massive commitment as well. You know, you're looking at thousands of pounds outlay for bikes and kit and all the rest. And whereas mountain biking, sort of downhilling in particular, I always think it's like downhilling feels as close as you can get to motocross without an engine.
Right.
It's like as fast as you can go on a dirt bike, basically, with no engine. But it's kind of like you just don't need to spend anywhere near as much money, and it's just a kind of different investment of time. You know, you can go for a day, have an amazing day, and be back, or you can go and sleep in the woods and spend the weekend there and stuff. It's quite similar in a way to carp fishing in that respect. I've got a couple of mates as well that that are really into it as well, and that I go with. And yeah, it's that similar kind of vibe, just being out in the woods, you know, like living out of the van.
Yeah.
Got your stove and stuff, making coffees in the morning and what have you.
Yeah, I know I mentioned to you on email about surfing, and it wasn't until I grew up in Cornwall, but not been back for years and years and years. Went back this summer, and it wasn't until I'd been back that I could see the local surf guys, and kind of, as I do with everything now, I always relate it back to the carp fishing. Yes. I was like, it's kind of similar, like, these boys are not from round here. They've tanked down with their weekend. They've probably clocked off work, jumped straight in the van, thinking about it all week, and
exactly
maybe getting all their bits ready, like leading up to it. And then they go and they find these lovely secluded little spots, and they go surfing for the weekend.
Surfing's got a much more so than riding, actually, because with surfing there's a real kind of element of the unknown in it that you can't control, whereas when you go riding you can basically control all the elements. You know, like the hill is basically still going to be the same. Some days it might be a bit wetter, some days it might be a bit drier, but it's basically this, you know, it's the same hill, or the same trail, or whatever, or the same track. Whereas with surfing it's so weather dependent. If the swell isn't quite right, the wind direction isn't quite right, or something like that, then either the waves simply aren't there, or whatever. So there's like a huge element that you can't control, and there's often quite a big element of waiting as well. I think with surfing, that's the other real similarity to carp fishing. Is, you know, to get real quality waves, especially when you live in Cornwall, you wait weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks sometimes for that spell. And when the swell is good and when the winds come good, it's like when there's a full moon and there's a big southwesterly tanking in.
It all just falls into place.
Everything coalesces and everybody is there.
Yeah.
You know, it's just exactly the same in the carp fishing world, isn't it?
And everything's dropped to go and
everything's
make
dropped
the most of it.
Just to go and make the most of those weather conditions. So yeah, it's the exact same thing, really. And also, like, you know, the guys that have just ditched their lives, bought vans and just spent years
doing what they love.
Yeah, just, you know, just living around Europe, you know, living out of a van.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that in surfing, or a lot of people, you know, sort of live like that, just literally chase the waves and chase the seasons. You know, I suppose very much really in a similar kind of vein to what Samir is doing now. It's not really the done thing so much in the carp fishing world. There's not really that many people doing it. There's a couple of people like Alex Kobler, and the other Alex as well, Norgate, isn't it? That, you know, that both bought vans and kind of did like the big trip thing. That's like a really normal thing to do in the surf world. Yeah. Not at all in carp fishing terms.
Nah, you know? But I think especially like Samir documenting what he's doing, I can see it becoming more popular, especially with what the year we've just had. People just going, life's too short.
Do you know what?
Go and,
yeah, why not? I remember, I spent 6 weeks down the west coast of France and into Spain one year surfing, just living out of our van. And we bumped into these guys from the Czech Republic that we spent, because it's quite a big car park scene. So during the day on that like west coast of France, the car parks during the day are full of all the tourists, all your kind of usual beachgoers, families or what have you. Come 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, there's just the surf fans left in the car park. Everyone else has gone home, gone back to their apartments, got whatever, campsites and things. There's just the guys basically living in the vans. And at some of them, like main breaks, there'll be 10, 15, 20 vans, something like that. And so there's like a little bit of a community really of sort of people doing a similar thing. And we spent a good few weeks actually with a couple of guys, and you know, sharing food together, eating, you know, kind of hanging out. And these guys from the Czech Republic, and they basically, it was like, I think it was 7 or 8 years previous, they both had really good jobs, had a house, nice place, sold it, ditched their jobs, bought this van, planned to do one season, and just never went home.
Yeah.
They just never went home. So had this beautiful van, like all built, decked out with wood and stuff like that. And they just chased the weather and chased the seasons down the coast. They go down into Morocco, spend the winter in Morocco and in Africa, buy loads of really beautiful materials, and then they go back up into France when the weather got better, back in the spring. And then I can't remember her name, but she used to make these really beautiful pieces out of leather and the materials that they'd got in the winter, and she used to sell them, and that they like worked a little bit, but not really. But yeah, they've been out
enough
there like
to get by, and
7, 8 years. And they were so stoked. They were like the happiest people that I'd ever met.
It's mad. I've never associated that scene with being as close as, well, obviously in the UK and then France and Europe, because I've got a few friends who've moved out to Australia.
Yep.
Never tried surfing in their life, and now I look at their Instagrams and they're absolutely loving it, and it is that stereotypical sort of like that Instagram filter on the beach in the morning, the waves coming in, and they're all just surfing the waves and things. But I didn't realise it was that sort of popular or big, like to be able to go down the west coast of France and Spain and things.
Yeah, it is massive. It is massive, and it's a pretty sort of, I mean, there's the kind of the outside perspective of surfing has been this really beautiful, you know, girls in bikinis, palm trees. It's always beautiful. Like the reality, certainly as a UK surfer, is so far from that. It's you know, it's not. It's like dog shit in the car parks, and you know, like struggling to get your wetsuit on
Yeah.
with hands that are so cold. It's, you know, that's the reality of surfing in the UK, but kind of breeds a sort of like grit, I think, to the people that do it. It's like, you know, the people certainly that surf through the winter in the UK, like you don't do that unless you really truly love it.
Yeah.
Because it's just too hard. Like the water's too cold and it's just too difficult. Like if you're not mega passionate about it, you're not doing it. You know, like the UK gets a bit busy in the summer, the main breaks and stuff, but come sort of November, December, January, February, it's just the people that really
love it. And again, just like carp fishing, like you sleep outside at night in the winter.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of countless days where I've been trying to get back. This was when I had my used to have a little polo, and it's the classic, like you just hide you don't take your key out with you just tuck your key behind the wheel, basically, if you ever want to nick a car and come that's done. Cut that. But yeah, everyone just tucks their keys behind the wheels, basically. And this was sort of pre having like a transporter that had had a remote central locking thing. Remember, like just having hands so cold that I couldn't physically open the door of my car because I couldn't hold the key to turn it. So you end up with crab claws, like they're just you can't use your fingers. But there's just something same as being out fishing in them kind of conditions, something about that, just being out in nature and out in the elements when it's raw and when it is brutal. Just something about that I think is just amazing. It makes you feel alive, doesn't it? And it's lovely being wrapped up afterwards as well. You know, going for a surf in the winter, almost one of the nicest elements of that is like the post like surf glow that you get afterwards, because you just feel like it's incredible for your for your circulation and everything as well. Get a nice warm coffee wrapped up with big roaring fire in a pub or something somewhere.
Even like fishing when you've just been out and it's just been pissing it down the whole time. It's through your waterproofs,
and
then when you get back home, it's a nice feeling. But on the subject of weather as well, it might sound a bit random, but I was speaking to Curly as well, and he tells me that you've been struck by lightning. Now,
No, not directly, or at least I don't think that I was struck directly, but I was knocked out. Yeah, I was knocked out by it.
Was this surfing or was this?
Surfing. Yeah. So in Cornwall, just round from St Ives, on this it's like a little secret spot called Hawke's Point. If you had massive westerlies, it was really sheltered because there's this huge, big, high headland. And my teammates Hannah and Arlo were down there. There was no storm around. It had battered down with rain, and we'd walked down. It's a big, long walk down a cliff path. We stood on the end, and then I can't even explain it. What happened? Literally 1 second, it's like we're stood here like this talking. The next, everything's just gone whoop, and the next thing I know, I'm 20 yards away, face down in the dirt. Like there was no sound, there was no boom, there was no flash, there was no nothing. It was just like that. Like 1 second I'm here, next second you're 20 foot over there. I've opened my eyes and I was just like, what the fuck just happened? I had no comprehension. I just couldn't work it out. My mind was just reeling. I can smell burning. I can hear people screaming. I was just like, I've looked round. Arlo and Hannah are still just flat out like that. And I've looked down onto the beach. There's a girl face down on the beach, a guy floating face down in the shallower water. And I've turned round and there's just a tree just turned inside out. Still ash in the air and stuff like that. And then obviously I realised, I was like, shit, it was lightning. And Arlo and Hannah came round pretty quick. The guy that was in the water, he came round pretty quick as well. Some guys got to him and he just came round of his own accord. The girl that was on the beach, she was like an air ambulance job.
No way.
They had to got the old defibrillators on her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic.
She was all right though?
She was all right, yeah. Thankfully, there was a doctor lived in the house on the cliff.
Right.
He'd heard the commotion, obviously realised at the point of being struck by lightning, came out, heard the commotion, basically. He went down onto the beach and started giving her mouth-to-mouth and CPR, basically, and kept her going until the air ambulance turned up. But I think it was touch and go. Her heart stopped like 2 or 3 times. And she was, I actually found that my mum brought a load of stuff. My mum, during lockdown, cleared out the attic and she brought a load of old photos down, like wadges and wadges of old carp photos of me from back in the day and stuff. And there was actually the newspaper Yeah. It was on the front cover of, I forget what paper it was, one of the Cornish papers.
Yeah.
It was on the front cover, a picture of the girl sat on the beach and the story. But yeah, it's mad. So I've always been a little bit twitchy around,
especially fishing.
Since definitely. And you get them big storms in Europe as well. Seems like every time I went to Europe last year as well, there was some crazy big storm.
Yeah,
happened a few times. Yeah, and you're often pretty exposed on them big places as well.
Yeah. Crazy.
It's all part of it though, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Bit of surfing.
You don't feel like you don't feel like you're alive, do you? Unless you're close to death.
I think that's quite. Tell your mates, I got struck by lightning, but I'm all right. You know, nothing stops me.
It's it is weird. Like I'm not so bad now, but for a long time, it would literally, as soon as I'd hear that first rumble of thunder, like, it would just do something. It would I just feel completely different.
I guess considering it all came out of nowhere, it's not like it was a storm above you.
No, that was the thing. It was literally from nowhere. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know whether it was just I think it was just the boom and I guess the sonic boom or the impact of it hitting the tree so close to us.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we weren't hit directly. I don't know, but because it was winter, we had full suits on, so we had boots and we had gloves on as well, so we were completely insulated. So yeah, I don't know.
Crazy.
Yeah, mad.
Going back to carp fishing, one thing I didn't know, you had a little dabble on the Mere after the Black Mirror.
Yeah, I spent a spring on there, not a full spring. Again, that was another not particularly meditated decision.
Yeah,
I was just like, do you know what? Sod it. I'm just going to go and have a go, kind of thing. And got my sort of. It's a funny one, that place, because you can't really fish it like you can a normal lake. So you do need a little bit of prep and planning for that place. You can't just turn up with your with your barrow and your bed and sort of thing and just kind of roll in there. It just doesn't really work like that. So yeah, that was a kind of I remember on the first day or the first time I went down there to actually put some kit in there, setting off from my house at like 1 a.m. or something, like 1:30, and just thinking, like, what am I doing? Like, it's ridiculous.
Had you been around the place before?
Yeah. I'd walked it a few times and kind of got my bearings and stuff, but turning up at sort of 2 a.m. kind of ready to sort of stash some kit, just felt bizarre, but really exciting. Massively exciting. It was flooded that spring as well, so you couldn't even walk around it without a pair of waders as well. So it was quite it was quite the mission. But really exciting few months fishing. I never really felt close. I started a bit early, really. In hindsight, it was a bit, I sort of jumped the gun a little bit, and you weren't like, I didn't for the first probably 4 or 5 weeks. Wasn't really seeing anything. There was sort of very little to go on. It was kind of like just fishing it, because you can't, again, it's not really like a normal lake where you can just like walk around easily and go and fish different areas easily. You're kind of, because you're stashing kit. I was basically leaving kit down there every week. So my like rods, like beds, everything was, so my bed was in a waterproof bed share bag, like wrapped in bin bags and stuff. That was stashed along with everything else and stuff. So it was kind of, you had to be a bit more sort of planned about it. But I only ever did the nights. I was sort of pretty careful really about how I fished it as well. Just stayed well tucked away. Waited till last light really to get the kit, got the rods out, and unless it looked incredibly good, then usually they were in at first light. And that was that. It was just one night really when I felt close. Had like half dozen liners through the night, heard a couple slosh out close on the end of a fresh south, like southerly. Felt close, but
you never see it in the water?
No, I didn't see it. Didn't see it. And that was the year that they all died as well.
Yeah, so that must have been, do you ever bump into Steve Briggs on there that year? Because I know he must have had it, what was it? You did the podcast with him a few weeks before it all ended.
Yeah, it wasn't too long before obviously they had the unfortunate fish kill.
Yeah, no, I can't remember what year it was. I want to say like 2012, 2013.
I think 2000. I think I saw a post on Briggsy's page this year saying 10 years ago to the day. So maybe
2011. 10 or 11, yeah. I think I was still fishing the car park. I was still fishing the car park at the time. So yeah, it would have been 2011 because I'd met Simon Hartop on the car park, and he did quite a bit on the Mere that spring as well. But he stayed on, whereas I went back to Yateley for the June the 1st start, and I can't remember when the fish kill was in the end.
Can't have been so long after that. It was all over.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, sadly. So yeah, it was a bit of a kind of it was over before it had started.
Yeah,
almost, which was a shame because it was an amazing place. It was an amazing place. I remember spending a day out. Well, not a day out, but a couple of hours in a boat one day. Just a beautiful, flat, calm, completely glassy day, and I was just like, I need to know what's going on out there. I'd been seeing a few shows at this point and stuff, and I was like, really need to go, and because again, it's not like a normal lake where you're doing a few hours leading or what have you, or because you're always trying to be a bit more kind of careful and a bit more tucked away. So, but I was just like, yeah, I kind of need to. So it was early in the day. So I took the boat out, and the water was so clear. You didn't even need Polaroids to see in like 12, 14 foot. You could see like every strand of Canadian everywhere. It was mental. There was like pretty much the entire lake bed was covered in fresh Canadian from sort of like 2 to sort of 8 inches. But it was so densely packed. It was just everywhere.
Yeah.
You could just see these like occasional tiny little spots, no bigger than a coaster. There'd be a little bit of sand in the bottom and a bit of sand kicked up around the weed and stuff, and they could feed anywhere because it was so rich. You just see these little spots kind of dotted around, and yeah, there was a couple of other spots actually that I dropped some corks on and stuff, and dropped a little bit of bait on, but just as it transpired, I just never really got the opportunity to sort of see it through.
Yeah, just one that wasn't meant to be this time.
Yeah, totally. And I think amazing to have had that little experience of it and fished it for a little bit. And I think places like that are so logistically difficult that you really have to commit to it. Like if you're half-hearted in any way, shape or form, unless you're incredibly lucky, just forget about it. Like
you can't flit on there and the car park at the same time and do bits.
No. I mean, any of them sort of lakes, to be honest, really. And I think that's why my fishing's changed in recent years, because you look at I've been around carp fishing for quite a long time now. You look at a lake, you look at the type of fishing, you look at the stock, you look at what lads are catching and how they're catching them and stuff like that, and you get a pretty good idea in your head, don't you, about how you would need to fish that to get a result on some of the lower stock places or whatever. And I think for them kind of places, you just got to make that commitment to say, well, okay, I know that's what it's going to take. So if I can't commit to that, then
walk away there.
Yeah, walk away there, because it's only going to end in
tears.
If you don't. And I've definitely over the last sort of 4 or 5 years been stung by that quite a few times. Wanting to fish places, but not really committing to them properly, or not really having the the resources, or probably, if I'm honest, like the drive to commit to them properly. Because I think how I feel about my fishing's definitely changed massively over the last 4 or 5 years. Like I'm as keen as ever for my fishing, but not the same fishing that I was. Yeah, definitely.
So it leads on pretty well into the fact that I guess you've been over to Europe before this, but over the last 4 or 5 years, you've really chucked everything into the European fishing, really, haven't you?
Yeah, it's about 10 years ago I first started going over there, actually. When I was fishing Yateley, actually, James Davies that netted heather for me. We went over and fished the Kempish. His mum and dad had got a Dutch barge over there, cool. And it was on the Kempish at the time. Which was sweet. So we went over one autumn when must have been in half term, actually. So it would have been probably the October half term, because I was teaching at the time. We went over and did a week over there on the Kempish, and that was my first. I've been to a couple of French commercials years previous, but that was my first sort of taste of public water European fishing, and it was just amazing. It just felt amazing, just like raw, a bit like the park lake sort of thing. It had that kind of feel to it, like big trucks coming in and out, unloading all night, opposite lights everywhere,
just new,
industrial,
wasn't it?
Just new and exciting. And I caught one first night, actually, only a fairly small one, and then we blanked for the rest of the week. So it's a tough week's fishing. Obviously, there's some incredible fish in that canal system, as we all know, and it's quite a historic stretch, isn't it, as well? So yeah, that definitely sparked a bit of interest to go back. But I probably didn't go back really for another couple of years. I think it was probably 2 or 3 years. And then since then, I've sort of been going at least once or twice a year. It was always in the school holidays. Yeah. So usually it'd be sort of Easter, and then sometimes in the summer, and then October half term, really. So yeah, 2 or 3 trips a year, really.
Did you find, obviously, making that another transition, if you like, over to Europe and that, you were still sort of English-based tactics? Because at this point, I presume when you first got out, it's not as if you're fishing these 100,000 acre.
No, not at all. No, it was very much English style fishing initially, because it was Belgium, smaller lakes, park lakes, canals, small pits. And yeah, very, very English style fishing, which, to be honest, really suited the time that I had available as well, because I'd be teaching flat out up until half term. You'd be shot to bits really anyway. You'd be knackered because you just dragged yourself through till the end of term. Last thing really that I probably would have wanted to do would have been starting, loading the van with 8 or 10 leisure batteries, a few boats. That sort of fishing's chaos. Yeah, and takes so much kit and so much energy and drive to do it. Whereas the fishing in Belgium initially was amazing, because you were just going over there exactly with your English kit, 2 rods, little rucksack, bed, brolly, and you were fishing. And on the fishing point of view as well, it was brilliant, because you turn up, and if you angled, if you fished mobile, if you saw them and you got rods on them well, you just catch them. And that was just such a revelation. Yeah. Like, after years of fishing difficult English lakes where that just doesn't happen, like, being on fish guarantees you nothing really whatsoever on a lot of the difficult English lakes, does it?
We speak about it a little bit, don't we? Like how they're so conditioned, some of the carp over in this country, that they don't realise how good they've got it over there in a lot of Europe.
Yeah, it's so different. It's so different. It's just the pressure cycle. It's a 20-year pressure cycle, isn't it? Loads of I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, no, just and they were basically trying to make the argument that they thought the English fish were somehow clever is the wrong word, but were just kind of naturally more what's the word? Just careful, basically. So they were harder to catch, basically, just because they were more tuned into sort of this, like the other. And I was like, they used to catch the car park ones on free-line sweetcorn back in the day in the edge. I was like, they were only so hard. I was like, you wouldn't catch any of them these days on that. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to get anywhere near them. I was like, they were easy to catch in the early days. They were only so difficult to catch at the end because they'd had 20 odd years of angling pressure. Yeah. So they knew exactly what rigs were, what bait was, what lines were. That's the thing, they become so conditioned, whereas the pressure cycles out in Europe are so much further back on the vast majority of places. Obviously not everywhere, because there are still a lot of busy places out there, but on lots of the places, they're so much further back down the pressure cycle that you can just angle for them in a sort of completely different way. Yeah. And that just felt completely liberating, really. Because I'd have my little school holiday trips, and at the time I was fishing Roach Pier or, kind of wherever else, some of the other Ringwood lakes, this, that and the other. And obviously in some respects, the natural thing to do would have been to have gone and done a 3 or 4 nighter on my syndicate water over here. But the idea of that just never really appealed to me particularly. I'd be fishing them week in, week out in term time, doing a night a week or whatever, or, sometimes the weekends. But the thought of then going and spending my half term there, I just never really felt that excited by that idea. Whereas to go and do a week in Belgium, I was like, no, that's really exciting. Like, it's something new, it's fresh, it's a challenge, it's a week away. Fish well, you're gonna catch them as well.
Come back with something. But I guess also, especially it is for me anyway, when I go away somewhere like that as a holiday and go and have a little break, I'm actually quite excited then to go back to my English fishing.
Yes, totally.
Instead of going spending a week on my syndicate and then probably hating it by the end of the week. Yeah, it's nice to.
And that's the thing. Like, you said it exactly there. Like, I would that week in, week out big fish fishing. Like, you have to go through the shit times as well to get to the, like, if you really want that end result, you just have to go through the shit to get to that big capture or that fish you want at the end. Like you do have to put up with a lot of stuff that perhaps you're not always enjoying that much. And I think I just started to get to the point where there actually just seemed to be more and more of it that I just wasn't really enjoying.
Yeah.
You know, and I was coming back from a lot of sessions and just being like, just a bit deflated, just like I couldn't get anywhere near where I wanted to be. Just wasn't happy. It was really busy. It was this, it was that, the other. And you know, 10 years ago, I would have perhaps had more drive or determination to just to force it through. But I think it's just because I'm getting older now. I was just like, you know, if I'm just not really enjoying it, I'm just not gonna do it. And I think for a while I struggled because I definitely felt that there was a kind of not pressure, but there was kind of some sense of kind of you know, those were the sort of fish that I should have been fishing for. You know, I should have really been going to fish some of the other ringwood waters. You know, like Dinton was a classic example, incredible fish. Quite a lot of mates had fished there and stuff. Like, really, that was kind of the place to be as such. That felt like the natural kind of lake for me to have gone and fished, for the stamper fish that were in there. But like, I mean, it is an incredible lake, some unbelievable carp. And I did enjoy some of it, but I was just coming back and I was just like, I'm just not really, my heart wasn't in it. And with that sort of fishing, like we were saying before, like if you're not putting your heart and soul into it, you might as well just walk away, because it's, you know, it is that difficult. And if you're not there week in, week out and really, really working at it as well, not just turning up and making up the numbers, like you got to be really working at it, you know, walking around in the dead of night, baiting spots, you know what I mean? You've got to be on it. And I just found I was enjoying it less and less, and enjoying the European stuff more and more. The more I did, the more I found out about, the more I saw. And every time you go, you'd find out about another couple of places. You'd be like, oh my God, I'd love to go back there. Or, you know, or you do a night on somewhere, you'd be like, shit, I need to go back there sometime. And it's like now, I've got a list in my phone as long as my arm of places that I'd love to go back to.
Yeah, yeah.
But just finding, you know, loads of them I probably realistically never will.
Yeah.
Like there's loads I'm definitely going to go back to there at some point. Chances of finding the time to actually go back there are probably quite slim.
Especially when you're still on that sort of 2 or 3 trips a year.
Yeah.
On somewhere, and you've got a list as long as yours. Like, are you really gonna?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's just like on a really base level, it's just transported me back to how I felt when I was a kid, really, and when I didn't know too much about fishing.
Yeah.
It's an inevitability, isn't it, in life? Like the further you go down the line in something, the more you know about it, the more locked down it all becomes, and and sort of like the less exciting, I suppose, in some ways it feels. So yeah, to suddenly be turning up at lakes and just not having a clue where to start or what was in there or anything, just felt really, really exciting. Just transported me back to being
born again,
15, 16 again. Yeah. And just thinking, like, where do I start?
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, yeah, I know that one's probably going to get caught from the middle area if I spend the next 6 weeks in there.
Hope it's me. Yeah. So you went. So again, even the European fishing has had a kind of a journey of its own.
Yep.
Where you're really excited by those lakes that you were going over and fishing Belgium and whatnot, and then you've stepped up a level. And
I'd always wanted to do that. I'd always wanted to do that. Even from like, I remember watching like Alan Taylor's videos on from Shantico years ago, and just being like, Jesus, that's incredible. And Frank Warwick did quite a lot on there in the early days. Did really, really well on Shantico. Caught loads in the heyday when there was all the mirrors in there, all those original ones. I just remember seeing all the photos back then, just the sort of, you know, just looking like he was on an estuary, you know, just miles of mud stretching out behind, just like covered in mud as well, dirty, great big mirrors, and it just looking wild.
Yeah. And
even back then, I just remember thinking that is incredible.
Yeah.
Like that just looks like I'd love to go and catch a carp from that sort of environment one day.
Yeah.
And so I'd always wanted to do it, but it's just a big step. Like
massive step. Probably the biggest step in of any sort of angling, I would have said.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, definitely. I would say certainly for me, the biggest step up in what I understand angling to be, like the differences in how you have to fish on those big places.
Yeah.
The logistics involved in it, the difficulties, the kit, the expense, all that. I mean, just that I never felt like I could commit to spending the money 4, 5, 6 years ago, when I was teaching, I only had like a slot or 2 a year maybe. Because again, even back then, really the only time to do it would have been in the summer holidays. Because if you're going to travel south and you're going to do a big water trip, really you need at least 10 days. 7 days isn't, like, you could do it in 7 days, but if you're spending a day and a half driving either end, you're fishing somewhere
and
huge.
I know people who have gone down, it's taken 4 days to get 4 rods out.
Yeah, or just to find the fish, or just to, so a week, like the week half terms really were never sort of really long enough. So couldn't commit to spending thousands of pounds on kit just for one trip a year. So it's only really the last sort of 2 years really, since stopping teaching, doing a lot more in fishing, that I thought I was like, yeah, do you know what? I could actually invest in some kit now.
It's worth the investment.
It's worth the investment, and I could do 2, 3, 4 trips a year, and it would actually be worthwhile. And back then I didn't know anyone that had that kit really that I could have borrowed to share a trip maybe with someone or what have you. So, and it's I mean, I've got to be honest, it's one of the most exciting things I've ever done in carp fishing, like without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah,
definitely. It's definitely changed the way I feel about carp fishing massively.
Yeah,
definitely. I'm just not interested in chasing particular fish anymore.
Yeah. I mean, do you even have a ticket in England anymore?
I haven't got a single ticket. No. I have, but it's on the River Test. It's a roach and grayling
ticket.
Right, yeah. No, I haven't got a single UK ticket. But that said, I am hopefully going to get a really nice UK ticket actually next year, because I think this year's, it's kind of just made me realise, actually, do you know what? I perhaps can't do 6 big trips a year, like physically, financially. It's probably realistically just too much. So I was like, I need something in the UK that I can get my teeth into, that I can get excited by, and that I can do in between trips as well, because
get your fix from back
home. Get my fix,
a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Because I can't do 10 trips a year to Europe as much as I'd love to.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen. And I don't want to be away from home that much either. Do you know what I mean? I love my home life and everything else as well. And I think this year sort of taught me that as well. Yeah, I mean, Sarah's amazing. Yeah. Sarah is really, really good. And, she's happy. She's really happy for me to be away. As long as when I'm at home, I'm like compos mentis and, up for doing stuff. When you get back from them big trips, you're shot to bit. It's like 2-3 day recovery almost, isn't it? Because you haven't slept for 8, 9, 10 nights. You've driven 2,000 miles or whatever and all the rest. And like last year, it'd just be like, big trip, a few days, and then I'd be away again for a week of tuition and stuff. So it was all, I was just like, this is just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. So, got UK ticket for next year, and hopefully just sort of do maybe 3, maybe 4 sort of big trips, maybe a couple in the spring, a couple in the autumn. But yeah, just have to see how things pan out.
See how the winter goes and then judge it.
Yeah,
moving forwards.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I don't think I'm going to make any plans, to be honest, until after the winter. I still don't think this is anywhere. Sadly, I just don't think it's anywhere near done. I think we've got a bit of a long road with it all yet. So, just gonna wait and see. And I mean, the beauty of that sort of fishing is, in some respects, you kind of don't need to make any plans. Like, if I wanted, I could go home now, load my van, chuck my passport in, and just drive to France.
Yeah, you don't need to book anywhere or anything.
You can just you can just turn up, which I love as well. I love that aspect. I've set off on quite a few trips not knowing where we've been going
to end up, let alone country, let alone venue. Do you know what I mean? It's,
yeah. And I love that now. I think, and again, I think it's probably just because I've been carp fishing for 30 years, and I think a bit like the arts thing as well, and the being creative. It's like it's always a progression. And I think I've always felt like I've kind of wanted my fishing to be a progression in some way, not for catching bigger fish. Like, that doesn't really bother me that much, like at all, really. I mean, people think naturally of Europe as just being about big fish, but like far from it. If I'm catching 20 pounders, 30 pounders, the odd 40 pounder, I'm more than happy. I've got no desire to go and spend the next 5 years chasing a fish in the UK that will break my English PB or sort of anything like that. That doesn't just sort of drive me at all. But yeah, I think the progression thing is important to me, like feeling challenged, feeling stimulated. And I think these days I'm probably more excited by the places that I'm in than the fish themselves. Like, they've got to be nice fish.
Yeah.
But I'm more driven to just soak up and experience like the whole experience of the place, as opposed to,
because when you get out of the van at some of those places as well, like, I mean, you take a great photograph, it'll never do it justice.
no,
Never.
no,
And there's so many times where I've been to Europe, and even places which aren't like particularly aesthetic to the eye, but you get out and it's this big shipping canal, and you just like, and you just feel so, and you don't get it in England, really.
No.
Like,
I love the feeling of fishing places where you feel like you just shouldn't be carp fishing.
so out of depth.
Not
Like,
because it's like against any rules or it's illegal or
Yeah.
something like that, but it's just not the environment designed for carp fishing.
Yeah.
Either because the swim is so rough and raw, you can't get, like building. I remember when I sat up once with Samir. I was like, Samir, how are you getting your sticks in? He's just like, oh, I'm just building rock towers. And I was like, what? I've like looked around and he's just like building piles of rocks and sticking
Slotting them in.
and they're like wobbly as fuck. And I'm just like, oh shit, right, okay.
Yeah.
just little things like that, just not designed for carp fishing. Like it's just like you say, like the big shipping canals, just industrial, like there's nowhere to put your brolly, it's concrete or whatever, it's massive boats. Like some of the places, like we fished one place early last year, it's like 110, 115 foot deep. I was just like looking at the stuff on the Echo and just being like, what? Where do we fish? There was like the remains of a quarry and stuff like that. Like looking at some of the stuff on the Echo and just being like, Jesus Christ! Like it was weird. It was almost freaking me out looking at we were out there in the boat at night as well.
Yeah.
Big wind. We're only a fairly small boat. Just looking at stuff on the Echo and just the depths of water was like crystal tap clear. I was just like, that is mental. It's like 80 foot deep and there's a quarry underneath me. Just these massive, big, jagged rocks and stuff like that. You're like, this is nuts.
Difficult to figure
Where
out.
do I put a hook bait?
Yeah. Where'd you put that much of? Yeah.
I caught a chub from like 45 foot on the edge of it. It was like a service road on the edge of this, like a massive plateau. It was the only bit that seemed fishable really on this one bank. And there was like these terraced bits that sort of stepped down with big walls, and you could see them really clearly on the Echo, and big rocks everywhere. So we were just looking for areas that weren't like savage rock. The kind of the benchmark for finding a spot to put a rig was like, are you getting a double or triple drop?
Yeah.
Basically, is it falling between cracks in the rocks? Is it something that's just not savage, basically, so you can get a rig on it? There's like a bit of a service road around the edge of it. It must have been from the old quarry. And in the end, we fished right on the edge of that, and it was just really defined. You can see it on the Echo, and it just plummet off down into the abyss. We fished right up on the edge of it, and I caught two chub actually off the edge of it.
Crazy.
Mad. It's crazy environments to fish in, but that's really, really exciting.
I think once you've done everything, or what you've experienced for your angling career in the UK, I think that is the natural step into getting that buzz again. I know we touched on it.
I don't know. I haven't caught half as many big fish as rakes of UK. There's so many guys out there these days that have caught so many big fish. Like I feel embarrassed really about how few that I've caught. Like and there's so many more big fish around these days as well. That's the other thing. I've never really fished any sort of prolific big fish waters, really. The only one that I really fished, I suppose, was Roach Pit, that had like pretty decent numbers of big fish in, I suppose. I can't remember where I was going with that.
It's just that how Europe is naturally that. Because I mean, sitting here now, the thought of me going to do that, I'd be like, as exciting as it sounds, I haven't experienced enough of I wouldn't be ready for that. I'll be nowhere near ready for that. I still worry about how far I got to clip up in comparison to where my spod's landing, and I will prang about that all night thinking,
let alone 100 and
let alone 80 foot, and I'll just be like, nah, I'm gonna go down the pub.
But it's
Do you think you need someone to go and show you the ropes a little bit first, or because I definitely going and fishing Belgium. The first time I went out, I got taken to this beautiful little canal, and it was English fishing flick.
Yeah,
this is brilliant. Like, and then the next time, I was literally forced kicking and screaming to this shipping canal. I was like, I want to go to this little canal again. But
of course, you're a bit of writing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally was so out of my depth, but I wouldn't have been able to do any of that without or my mate to take me and show me and go, you put your rod here and you put this in front of your rod pod so it doesn't get dragged in by the flow, and like
this is the sort of size rock you're going to elastic band to your leg clip.
As a lead, without someone to kind of show you the ropes, it is hard.
Yeah.
And you can't really go and just
definitely
work it out.
No. That first trip with Samir for me was massive.
Was that the first trip you really
got? It was my first big water trip.
Yeah,
definitely. I'd fished quite a lot of places, but nowhere that far south and nowhere quite that big. And that was definitely an eye opener. Definitely, just lots of little things, all the little things you wouldn't necessarily think about. How to fish with your GPS really, really well. How to log all your home points, like how to get back in a dead straight line without wiping everything else out.
Yeah,
just like because it's quite a technical. It's weird because it's like it's really raw in some ways. It's like really, really base level fishing. Like to catch them half the time, you've just got to find them and get a hook bait on a presentable spot. But then there's lots of aspects that are really, really challenging as well, and some technical, like say, with the obviously the echo use and stuff like that. So that was all pretty new. That was all really new to me. So that's a whole different world. But it's just learning, isn't it? I think for me, like carp fishing, like anything in life, it's just one great big learning exercise, isn't it? And I think for me, as soon as I felt like I've stopped learning somewhere, I just get bored.
Going through the motions.
As soon as I'm going through the motions and I'm just doing what I know I need to do to get to point, I don't know. I just think it's as I'm getting older. I just feel like I've not got time for that anymore.
Yeah, time's
I'm 40 years old now. I've just got, there's so much stuff that I want to see and so much stuff that I want to do. So much stuff that I want to experience. I just kind of, it can be bad for that sometimes. I just want to do everything all at once.
Yeah.
Try and spin too many plates and then, get a couple of months down the line and have to go back to square one because you've run yourself into the ground or whatever.
So speaking of kind of like side projects and achievements you want to make in that, you did an incredibly successful book series, Subsurface Journals.
Thank you.
I thought they were wicked. When was the first one out?
2013.
13, yeah. It's
quite a long time ago now. 7-8 years ago.
What made you want to dive into doing that?
Oh, that's a rabbit hole in itself, isn't it? In a nutshell, I suppose...
Was it your first publication?
No, I'd done the Forgotten Chapters, which was just the sort of guest chapter book a couple of years previous, which was just a more traditional book format. Sub really just naturally followed on from that. The Forgotten really was... I was mixing with loads of guys that were catching loads of big fish and who I just felt were really, really interesting anglers. And I was just like, there isn't a platform for this stuff. Like Carp World would run the odd piece by people that sort of weren't particularly well known. But most of the other mags really were predominantly full of stuff that was, either sort of shoehorned in through ads, link ups and stuff like as obviously magazines work. Or it was sort of technical based stuff. The majority of it back then, really. I think it's changed quite a lot now, and I think there's a lot more really, really different material out there now. But I think back then, quite a lot of it was like that. And so I was just like, I just couldn't see anyone else doing anything like that. And I was just like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it. So I spoke to a few people. They thought it was a really good idea. Spoke to Empress publishers. They were up for publishing it, just went from there. It took me a couple of years to put together that first one. But I just liked that idea of putting something out there that, because there were some people in there that were really well known. Obviously, like Darryl Peck had a chapter in there. He was probably the best known, I suppose, of the like Simon Scott had a chapter in there. Just thinking back now, but there was a lot of guys that the vast majority of carp anglers would probably never have sort of seen or heard of before, and for me, I'd always thought that their stuff was just as interesting and just as exciting as the stuff that was in the mags all the time.
Yeah.
But there just wasn't really a platform for it. So, that went down really, really well. That got a really good response. And so Sub just felt like the natural kind of progression really from there. But I'd always been involved with art and design and sort of everything else. I'd always been really interested in the idea of how stuff looks as well, like how you can present stuff visually to make it really exciting. So I wanted to do something that was much more like photography and design based with Sub, something that felt really fresh, felt really different, because The Forgotten was a pretty traditional book really to all intents and purposes, column of text, picture, column of text, picture sort of thing, which a storybook I think does need to be. but yeah, for Sub, I just wanted to do something that brought a lot more stuff in, had a lot more interview-based pieces, shorter pieces, and yeah, just something that it's kind of had a little bit of an attitude to it as well. Something that was just a little bit punchy.
It was very different to anything that was.
Yeah, it was
like
back then.
And I say very different, I mean worlds apart, I guess, from anything.
Yeah. And in hindsight now, I look back at some of it and kind of wince a little bit with a couple of things that, you know, that I'd written. But when you put it into context of the time, and I think like the way things were, like the vast push for the most part really was product driven, really. Yeah, it's changed so much now. There's so much incredible stuff out there now that really does carp fishing justice, and the journey and the beauty and the aesthetic and the stories and the characters and like all that. But I think back in like 2010, 11, 12, like there wasn't a huge amount of that stuff out there. Like, in fact, really there was very little. Yeah. Most of the videos were sort of technical based, like how to session based pieces and this, that and the other. And I just sort of, I just felt like it was a bit of a shame really that like the kind of characters and the sort of spirit of carp fishing, how I saw it myself, I suppose, didn't really feel like there was a platform for that. And it seemed like there was a lot of other people that
I was going to say, and there was clearly a big amount of people who felt the same way. Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, I think it would have been a lot more commercially successful if I'd reined it in a little bit, toned it back, and kind of played the game a little bit more. I think back then I was teaching, I was like, fuck it, I just don't.
Because it was never.
I don't care. I was like, I don't need it to make money.
Yeah, it was like, never meant to be commercially successful, was it?
No. Like I've literally, but it's pretty much cost me money, like the whole project, because the way I did everything as well was so stupidly expensive. But it didn't matter because I had my teaching salary. I was earning good money teaching, so it just didn't matter, which was lovely. So it was just, it was a true love project. Yeah, really. So and I did the one a year for 3 years. But then by the end of the third year, like trying to put 400 pages of really nicely designed stuff together alongside teaching was just a killer. And trying to fish a bit as well. Yeah. Was just literally killing me. Yeah. So just had to chuck the towel in. And because my teaching commitments had kind of ramped up at the same time, roughly as well, I was just like, it's going to send me under if I carry on trying to do this.
Because I guess going into that first one, the after doing Forgotten Chapters and then going into the Sub 1, the design process and the whole process between collating it and laying it out and putting it out must have been really exciting. Yeah. And by the end, it was probably pull your hair out stuff.
No, it was still really, really exciting. Oh, really? Yeah, it's just the sheer volume of stuff to do. And also, like, I didn't feel, teaching's not one of them jobs you can walk in and walk out of, like, at all. Yeah. I would regularly be bringing like 30 or 40 A-level sketchbooks home to do over, like, to mark and feedback on over a weekend, and you're giving them like really detailed, in-depth feedback and stuff like that. And so, there was times as well where I felt like I just can't juggle this. I was like, that has to come first. And this, like, I really want to do this. I'm really passionate about it, but there just isn't physically enough hours in the day to do it. So it was just the sheer volume of, because it was only me running it as well. So it was like I was doing the social, I was doing like the guy that designed it, Steve, I was working with him doing all the art direction, like a lot of the design and stuff, all the pieces themselves. Obviously I was either writing them or interviewing them myself and stuff as well. So it was just too much really.
Must be seriously rewarding though, seeing, because I mean, if anyone knows the books, they're not a small book. I mean, we've got them on the shelf behind you now. But
in hindsight, so the original plan was to make them a lot smaller, like 100, 120 pages, and it was going to be like quarterly or sort of biannual. That was the idea. But I realised very quickly that there's no way I was going to be able to go through like the proofing, like the sort of proofing and launch process 2 or 3 or 4 times a year alongside everything else. I was just like, because that's the worst bit of it, basically. Yeah. The rest of it's all right. It's just emails, meeting up with people, like doing this thing. That's the kind of fun part. But I was just like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pull that off alongside teaching. I was like, that's just too much. So I was like, I'll just do 1 a year. But I kind of felt like if it was only 1 a year, I felt like it had to be pretty substantially big. Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, it'd just kind of get lost in the ether, I suppose. In hindsight, I think I probably could have made it half the size. but also there was so much material out there that I wanted to put out. And out of each of them, there was loads of stuff that ended up getting cut out.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, because my designer, Steve, would just be like, gee, do you know what the pagination's up to on this? I'd be like, no. And he's like, mate, you're up to like 350 pages already. I'd be like, shit.
Yeah.
And because I was really uncompromising with how I wanted to lay stuff out as well. I was like, no, I want that to be full page shot. I don't want it in there small. Like that's got to be a full page. That's got to be a full page. That's got to be a full page. So I was really uncompromising like that. Like as opposed to squeezing more material in and running pictures smaller. I was always like, no, lay it out big, make it look really beautiful, make it look lavish. Like if you're going to do, at the end of the day, we all spend all our days these days looking at tiny little matchbox sized images, don't we?
Yeah.
It's like if you're going to put something in print, the one thing print can do really, really well is make stuff look really big and beautiful.
Yeah.
So that was sort of always what I wanted to do with it, really. And yeah, that sort of led naturally into the next one, which kind of takes that sort of even further, really.
Yeah. So there is, after, I guess you've been asked a lot.
Yeah.
Is there a fourth? Is there a fourth?
Yeah.
Is there a fourth? And there is.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. I've wanted to do one for years.
So the last one out was 2015.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's been 5 years, is it?
Yeah. Like I say, I just had to focus on the teaching.
Of course, yeah.
Really, that was the professional thing to do, and kept it ticking along the whole time, like with merch and clothing and stuff.
I was going to say, it's still grown into quite a big
brand.
beast, isn't it? The brand. Yeah.
To be honest, it's grown much more in recent years. Actually, sort of even kind of without the print. But I think probably just with the growth of social and stuff in general, I would say really. But yeah, I've wanted to do something else for a good 2 or 3 or 4 years, really.
Yeah.
Just because deep down, I love the process. I love the creative process. That's, I think I'm equally as excited these days about documenting carp fishing as I am about carp fishing itself.
Right. Yeah.
I would never want to trade one for the other, but I'm definitely massively driven by the idea of documenting it and sort of how it's represented and that as well. So, but yeah, I just wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just churn out a volume 4 that was basically the same as the others, but with new material.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'd have been sweet and there'd have been loads of stuff, that I could have put in there, but I just wanted to do something different. And I'd had the idea about doing a photo book for a long time. And yeah, finally, thanks to lockdown, predominantly managed to
was that the thing that really kickstarted it?
Yeah, I mean, we were already kind of well on the way with it. All the design was kind of already in place and stuff, but yeah, really it was the time during lockdown that really gave us the time to sort of put into it. That's the trouble with them kind of projects, is there's a huge investment of hours.
Yeah,
that is
real labour of love there.
Yeah, definitely. So so the script this time is slightly smaller. 352 pages, which is sort of equivalent to the first one. Actually, that was 300. That was about the same actually as sort of 350s, but larger format. So to visualize it, just a little bit bigger than an A4 sheet of paper. So yeah, probably about a quarter again as big as an A4, I reckon. Yeah. Hardback this time. So just big, really big spreads of images, and probably 80-90% of the book is just purely imagery. So there's very little writing in there. Some short pieces, and there's 4 or 5 short interviews. But the bulk of it is just really big, beautiful imagery. Basically just the most beautiful carp fishing imagery that I could find from anywhere across Europe.
And what made you really go for the photo side of things?
I think a couple of things. I think, like, as much as I love reading, I've got a lot less time to read, I think, these days. And I think a lot of other people are spending a bit less time reading. I just think everyone's lives are really busy these days. And I think, I just think we live in a slightly different culture.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're much more driven by images, but we consume the vast majority of them on a tiny little screen. And I just think there's never been more incredible imagery in carp fishing ever. Like, there's so many people shooting such amazing stuff these days.
Yeah.
all over you know, I'm continually blown away by
forever finding that little account and going like, oh my god,
200 followers, and it's like, where did you come from? Like,
yeah, but it'd just be so good. And you know, the quality of camera kit these days, and just I think just the general community of Instagram, because I think Instagram is a really positive place for that, because it offers a platform to put it out there and to get it seen, but it's also really inspiring, isn't it? You know, to see that stuff and just think, shit, that's amazing. I'd never thought about shooting anything that way. Or, but I couldn't help but feel that it was just a bit of a shame that it's just lost to the ether within, you know, what is it, like a second? Just over a second. It's not even a second, is
Alf
it?
will tell you the stats.
Yeah, what's the stats for the average length of time?
For consumption, I think Instagram's the fastest paced consumption of any media.
What is it, like 1.2 seconds?
Yeah, it's hardly anything, which is why these days, I think what you were talking about, the way people have changed, convenience and attention span, their attention span just isn't there as much for the written word anymore. They just want, it's just fast consumption.
I mean, it is what it is. Like I just said, it's an amazing place to be inspired as well. And I'm just as bad as anyone else for getting sucked into my Insta. Like, I spend loads of time on it, way more time than I should do, and I'm really conscious of that as well. And I try not to, but it's just a really addictive platform, isn't it? And because I'm quite a visual person as well, I just enjoy looking at beautiful stuff. So I think there's a bit of that as well. But yeah, so I just wanted to cherry pick as much of the best stuff that I was seeing from all over that community. Some guys that I knew already, some that I'd never really spoke to before but followed their accounts, stuff like that. Just wanted to cherry pick as much of it as I could and just print it as big and as lavish and as beautiful as I could, so that it could just have a slightly different platform and could be seen. And I think, you know, there's always going to be space for all of it, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? You could never have one or the other. You know, we'll never just go purely digital, and it's obviously clearly never going to go back to being purely print. But I think just putting stuff out there that is done like that. Hopefully, I still firmly believe that there's a place for it. No one does it these days because print is basically really slow, really expensive, and hard to sell. This is the bottom line.
Yeah.
So it's like, really, why would you invest your time in doing that instead of putting out a like really nice video edit? That would probably be the much more sensible thing to be investing my time in. But I just love print, and I just think that it's the perfect like vehicle to see good photography in. You just look at it differently.
Yeah, you cannot
straight away. You look at it differently.
Cannot be
even just with the pictures we've got around the office. I mean, these have been done recently, and I'm used to seeing them on a phone compressed. But to see the detail in the office, and you think, wow, it really does. So you're absolutely right.
They sink into your consciousness. It sounds like pretty hackneyed and old fashioned now, but like I can still remember like a whole bunch of photos from my childhood, from either from some books or from magazines and stuff like that. And I can still remember so many details of those shots, like how they looked, how they felt, the colours, and there's no two ways about it. You just don't get that with shots on social. Like, it's rare that I ever go back to a photo, no matter how good it is, to look at it in digital form. Whereas if it's in a big, beautiful, lavish coffee table format, you know, hopefully people pick it up and look at it a bit more. And I think, you know, photography is a lovely thing as well, because the process, it's lovely to look at, but it's also a really exciting process itself. So I think, you know, hopefully, you know, if it encourages people to pick up their cameras and shoot a bit more as well, because it's really exciting getting a good shot. You know, that it doesn't happen often, and a bit like you were saying before, you get to these places, you take a shot and you're like, that just doesn't capture what I want it to capture.
Yeah.
But then occasionally you'll take shots that really does capture something really, really special, somehow manages to tell a story of that whole place and that feel just in a single shot.
Yeah.
And kind of they're the ones that I've somehow sort of tried to find and tried to choose, like shots that really, where you can really feel them.
Yeah, I think it's because I'm biased, because I love my photography and my carp fishing, but I just think they fit so hand in hand.
You've got so much time, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, and a lot of carp fishing, you're sat there looking at rods in this amazing location, and you're pulling in that location, the atmosphere, and if a photo can take you to that location, that atmosphere, that feel of it, there's not many other sports that really do that. I think like football photography, or for example, like it will never sum up the action and the pace of that game.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I don't know, I can look at a photo and it will just take me to that swim or that place, that time, that season, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think, photography has lots of different functions, doesn't it? But I think, like you say, on a personal level, for it to transport you back to that memory, I think is incredible. And then for other people to see a shot, maybe from some, maybe it is from some crazy industrial Belgian shipping canal or something, and just think, Jesus Christ, I'd love to go and fish somewhere like that. That would be mental. And whether they do or don't, doesn't really matter. It's like, I've used a quote on the back, actually. It's Ollie's quote. And it just says, you want people to stop and, what are the exact words? It's basically just saying you want people to stop and look at it and live it for a second. You want someone to live that, like, that atmosphere, that scene, that moment that you've captured. You want them to be able to live that. And I think the best shots can do that, can't they? They can transport you to that.
Yeah.
So that's due out end of November. All going well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
have you had any setbacks so far? I think, didn't you go through a bit of a process recently where?
No, not really. There's it just is what, it is what it is. It's always difficult getting everything together.
Yeah.
But no, it's been pretty smooth, really.
So looking good for the end of November.
It's on the press. So I'm up at the press next week to go and see the first sheets off, basically, and just go and just make sure everything's colour matched perfectly and everything's as it should be with the prints. I'm really excited to go and see it roll off the press, and then end of November.
Yeah, so it should be, from when this podcast is out, it'll be dropping imminently. And hopefully they would have already seen loads of stuff on social media, funnily enough, that will point them on to where they can see it. How can people find it? Website, is that where it's?
So it'll be on the Subsurface Journal web store. So on the Big Cartel. Yeah. Again, Instagram. You can just find it. You find the link through the Instagram, and stuff will be on there. What's quite nice about it as well, and Alf, I think you said it before. Like, when you take a photo, you do it through your own eyes, and you're seeing it. You're seeing something, you're putting your own spin on it, aren't you, basically? When you take a shot, you're taking it through your eyes. And I've tried to sort of put a really nice cross-section of stuff together that has all got its own different, unique feel. So it's, everyone's got their own take on stuff. So there's slightly different styles. There's some analog stuff as well, some grainy 35mm stuff as well from some of the guys over in Germany that are really into shooting that. They've got their own really beautiful aesthetic. So hopefully it's kind of diverse, a cross section of kind of what's being shot as I could do, really. So really excited. Yeah,
wicked.
Yeah, sounds forward to a great idea, and like you said, to number 4 being that little bit of a different spin to the previous 3.
Yeah, I like the idea of keeping people guessing a little bit as well, rather than just doing the same thing. I think it's good just to
definitely
keep shifting it forward. Just again, don't do the same thing. Do something different, and hopefully it makes it more. Because at the end of the day, the only thing I'm really interested in is the reader's experience of it. Like, I just want them to really enjoy it, and see something beautiful in it. So that's the end game, really. So you're always thinking about that.
And I think it's probably music to a lot of people's ears, because I know you've said a few times that that's it, those 3 done at the game.
Well, I always just thought I'd become an art teacher, or I was just going to be an art teacher for life. I'd be the grizzled, grey-bearded old art teacher in my jumper and my cords. Like when I was 60, never anticipated not teaching, if I'm honest. So definitely had to rethink a lot of things in the last couple of years. Definitely was well burnt out by the end of last year by doing so much tuition work and so much filming, and just kind of realised that I couldn't really make that work long term. I could do it for a couple of years and be fine. You can get through anything, can't you? For a few years. But I was like, it's just not going to work long term. So sub seemed like the only natural thing to do, really, because it's my company. I'd built it. I'd kept it going, even though I hadn't produced any print for the last few years. So it just felt like the natural thing to do, really. So So I'm not doing any more tuition work.
Oh, you're stopping that now?
Stopped completely.
Cool.
Yeah. So I did my last one a couple of weeks ago. And the plan is just to work on sub full time, really, and then carry on doing the work for Sticky and Thinking, bits of film work and what have you, content creation and stuff.
Yeah.
And then hopefully just get back into some of my own fishing as well, because last year, like when you're fishing the tuitions, there is no time really for your own fishing.
Yeah.
Like anyone that works in the industry, you very quickly realise, don't you, when you're out all the time, you're filming or you're doing this, that, the other, your own fishing takes a massive backseat.
Yeah, 100%. Massively.
Yeah.
So
big nods there. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing industry to work in.
Of course,
like, absolutely. Definitely.
Oh yeah, never knock it.
You really change
never,
it for the world,
never.
like.
But
sacrifices and everything.
Yeah, sub just seemed the natural thing, really, for me to do. And if I can invest a lot more time in it, then because it had always just been like a not-for-profit, self-supporting thing. Everything that came from it just really went back into creating more stuff for it. But if I'm going to do it, obviously I need to turn it into something that I can actually make a living from.
So we can, dare I say, expect to see a bit more from Sub in the future.
Yeah, loads more, hopefully. Plans. Yeah, so I'm going to completely revamp the website. I'm gonna start writing a lot more. I'm gonna start putting a lot more blog content out there, myself and from other guys and stuff as well. And just turn the website into, because the website has never really done that much. When I set it up originally, the idea was to have like a really active blog and do this and do that and do the other, and just time constraints.
I think it's still on there, aren't there? There's still some those early bits.
And they were all done within the first month or two or something, and then I was just like, Jesus, I just can't keep up with this. So the plan is to do a lot more of that. I'd really like to do some podcasts myself as well, because I just think I love the format of them. I listen to loads,
and I think they'll always work better from an independent source, if you know what I mean.
Although to be fair, I think these all are independent. You know what I mean? You guys, I'm not sponsored by Nash. It's amazing really that you've got me sat here doing this. Obviously Corda, has done a few as well with non-Corda anglers, and I think that's really progressive as an industry. I think because it just shows that people are thinking, well, it doesn't really matter if they're not on the team, because they're carp anglers and we're all part of one big community and family. You got interesting stuff to say.
That's
and
what
talk
we wanted
about. And
so much out of these, wasn't it? Is that we almost didn't want to call it a Nash podcast. We just want to put content out for carp anglers. And I know, like you say, Corda have done the same, and they've got a huge diversity of anglers. Yeah, and it's brilliant. One of my sales reps said something to us a couple of weeks ago when I was at trade show. He said, I was always taught, no matter what industry you're in, support your industry.
Yep.
And no matter what. And I think I thought about that with the podcast as well, and just thought I don't want it to be a Nash Tackle one. So,
well, at the end of the day, you've got so many other channels for putting out stuff.
Of course.
With all your guys, haven't you?
Yeah.
You put out so much content anyway, that it's just the perfect little platform and vehicle, isn't it, to do something different.
100%,
they're great to, like we were chatting about before, when we came in, they're so nice to listen to when you're driving. I listen to loads on big drives, and they really, unlike listening to music, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive music fan, but I sometimes find it difficult when I'm driving because it doesn't stimulate your mind particularly. I find that you just, especially on them big drives in Europe, you're staring down 14, 15 hours.
Doesn't pass the time like a 2-hour podcast.
No, it doesn't pass the time. Whereas, you're thinking, okay, I've got 8 hours to kill, 4 or 5 hour-and-a-half podcasts. That's it. Sweet. I'm there.
But going back to saying what you were saying about trying to get some going through sub. Like I say, we'll always try and be as diverse as possible and accept anyone through the door. But I think the reality is sometimes you just cannot get to some of the people we'd love to do a podcast with. But I think from someone which is for people I'm watching it, I'm doing inverted commas, someone from a non-biased view, it's I think that's why Topography are also so successful with their off-the-record interviews and that sort of thing. They can access anyone and they can get a really, really warts and all sort of interview, and I think I think it works so well through sub.
Definitely, and again, it's amazing that there's so much good content out there these days. It's phenomenal. I think all the companies have massively pushed the envelope.
It's unreal
with film, podcasts, short edits, technical stuff, like everything. It's just amazing now. There's such a wealth of stuff out there, and you know, there's always going to be little niches for something that's like perhaps, you know, whatever's got a different angle to it, is a bit more edgy, is even a bit more kind of rougher and a bit more kind of warts and all.
Yeah.
There's so many people that I'd love to speak to, because at the end of the day, you know, you sit around lakes, don't you, having all these conversations.
Yeah.
And I'd always thought it'd be amazing to record this shit and put it out there.
Yeah.
And a few times, actually, some of the dictaphone recordings that I did for the big sub interviews, like Oz Holness's big interview, for example,
cool.
I had like 8 hours of tape.
Really?
Which is amazing, actually.
Yeah.
And a couple of my really, really close mates I've actually let have the audio file, and they've listened to it, and they're like, mate, that's amazing.
Yeah, you just put them out on their own. Like,
you could. I mean, I'll just, you know, obviously I'll just record it properly and, you know, kind of do stuff again. But it's great. I mean, I think when you're fishing as well, they're really good to listen to, because unlike watching a video, you can just listen to it. You can watch the lake.
Yeah, you don't.
You can sit them.
Yeah, very true.
You can sit a podcast on, you know, on your bed chair next to you, and you can still spend a couple of hours in the morning or whatever, or the evening, watching the lake, and you're not glued to a phone. I always think it's mad. Everyone's sitting around the lakes looking through Instagram at people fishing, you know, on a lake on the other side of the country. You're looking at them, looking at the, you know, it's just visit. Whereas a podcast, you can just get into the, you know, the words, can't you? You just, you know, drift away for a couple of hours, but still be driving or looking or whatever.
Yeah,
I've got a mate actually that he's a really, really good angler, fishes really, really hard, and he pretty much refuses to type messages. Like, he only sends voice notes.
Do you know what they do that? Like Germany as well. So
yeah, Germany.
All the Germans do that, and I always think they're good at things, aren't they? The Germans, so they're probably ahead of us a little bit. Yeah, efficient. But yeah,
I think for my mate, it's just because that he doesn't want to spend his time looking at his keyboard. He just wants to be looking at the lake.
Yeah.
Whereas you can have a conversation with someone where you might, you know, instead of spending an hour typing out on WhatsApp messages back and forth or whatever, you just send in voice notes that you can do without looking.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Absolute sense.
Yeah. But yeah.
Awesome.
So that's about the size of things. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we can end it on that brilliant, positive, look how good podcasts are. No? Yeah, it's a good place to end it. But massively appreciate you coming in, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been
you enjoyed it?
Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't believe it's that long. I apologise to anyone listening.
You don't have to apologise. No.
It's been so long. Hopefully you've made it to this point.
Yeah.
But
I'm always in the van thinking, especially on long drives, or even if you go there and back on the drive, you always want more. So I don't think you can have too long a podcast unless it's really boring, which this wasn't. So
hopefully not.
No.
Hopefully not. We'll get some good feedback.
I hope people enjoyed it.
Yeah, but thank you very much, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Bit of blast. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Cheers, mate.